Chapter 27. Gabe. A vibration in my pants woke me. I eased Ella from my chest to the couch and pulled my phone from my pocket. "Hey, Leo, what's up? How are the poodles?" "The dogs are fine. We have a different problem." My brother's voice came through along with music, chatter, and laughter. "One sec." I scooted Ella away from the edge and put a throw pillow beside her to keep her in place. Dumb move, but I didn't plan to go far. "What problem?" "There are several. One of the guys I put on Maggie was made tonight." My stomach lurched. "How and by who?" "Wayne O'Malley, while he was having an emotional conversation with Maggie." "What the fuck do you mean, emotional?" I inhaled and exhaled to the count of 5 and slid into business mode. I could handle this if I treated it like any other work crisis. This involved an employee, not the woman I planned to marry. "Your girl was upset. Crying, maybe." He paused and made a sound suspiciously close to a laugh. "Come on, man. You didn't think I meant they were together. Go on." Some of the tension eased from my shoulders. The situation was bad, but it could have been worse. I wouldn't end up in prison for killing the cop who put his hands on my woman. "Wayne told Jesse Maggie was sick and he was driving her home. They left a couple minutes ago." That son of a bitch. Maybe I go to prison after all. Anything else? Do you know what they discussed? "No clue, but earlier tonight she asked me about you taking over the business." The background noise quieted, but Leo kept his voice down. "What did you tell her about your job description?" "Not much, but she's smart. Smart enough to have a copy of the police records from Joe and Rebecca's accident." "I'll handle it. Touch base in the morning." I disconnected the call. Depending on where the detective had parked, I figured I had 10, maybe 15 minutes until Maggie arrived home. If I hustled, I could get a shower. The conversation would be hard enough without me smelling like chocolate-covered dog vomit. After settling Ella in her crib, I stripped and went into the bathroom. A car door shut out front. A few seconds later, I heard Maggie greeting Coco in the front of the house. I had 2 choices: slide back into my filthy jeans or have the talk with Maggie naked. I chose option number 2. After 5 minutes and no sign of her, I regretted my decision. Is she waiting for me to get out? She came into the bathroom at the exact moment I decided to go find her. "Hi, I really need to talk to you." "I heard you come in." I cracked open the shower door and gave her a quick once-over. She still wore makeup, so probably not crying. She'd smiled a little, so probably not pissed. Scratch that. She changed from her work clothes into a silky bathrobe. Definitely not pissed. "Sorry it took me so long. Ryan wanted water. Then I had to wait for him to pee, tuck him in again, and speak to Chloe about her dream about unicorns. This led to a debate on whether they would throw up rainbows or chocolate cake." I covered my cringe with a laugh. "I can see your unicorn dream and raise you talking to a teenaged boy about a girl." Maggie dropped the robe, stepped into the shower, and wrapped her arms around me. My God, she's gorgeous. I caressed her from her shoulders to her bare ass. "You're naked." "I never shower with clothes on." "What did Zach say? What girl?" "He has a crush on a tuba player named Sam. Wanted to know if I thought he should buy her roses for after the band concert." I tilted her head under the water, grabbed the shampoo and massaged it into her scalp. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to send her flowers at home. That way none of his knucklehead friends would tease him. If she shoots him down, it shouldn't be in public." "Good advice." She closed her eyes and let the water sluice over her head. I angled her beneath the spray and rinsed her hair. "Thanks. Now, about you being in my shower." "It's my shower." Maggie drew a shaky breath, and I knew she'd had enough small talk. I leaned down and brushed my lips across hers. "What did you want to talk about?" Maggie hung her head. "What is it?" I lifted her chin. "Why did your father insist Joe and Rebecca's accident wasn't an accident?" "A deal went bad. The owner made threats against Joe and my dad." "Did they stop after the accident?" Maggie rested her hands on my chest. Be it her touch or my need to come clean with her, I decided then and there to tell her everything. "The threats stopped before the accident because the guy offed himself." Her hand flew to her mouth. I nodded and continued. But Pops was still convinced it was the dead guy's people. The cops couldn't prove anything. "Is that why you held back on me in court? You don't think Papa Joe's paranoid at all, do you?" Paranoid, no. Cautious, yes. Maggie shivered.
I talked to a detective tonight, Wayne O'Malley.
I know him. Decent guy.
He asked if I was related to Rebecca, and the conversation went from there.
She pulled back and looked into my eyes.
Should I be worried? I mean, will someone try to kill you or me and the kids? I'm getting all these threatening calls.
What? A light bulb came on in the back of my mind. The prank calls?
Do you think they could be coming from Chantal?
Her question hit me like a throat punch. My daughter's mother harassed me via telephone, why not Maggie? It's a distinct possibility. I have people at Marchionni Corp who can trace them. Nodding, she murmured,
They're just calls, right?
I have no idea, but I intend to find out. I pulled her tighter and kissed the top of her head. We deal with some interesting people, but you don't need to worry. I had Leo put security on you. Her mouth fell open.
It was you? Why?
After the engagement announcement, I didn't want to take any chances.
My God, you scared the hell out of me. I thought your parents were having me tailed.
She smacked my arm. Ow, easy there, slugger.
I don't want people following me.
Mags,
we'll talk about that later. I have more important questions right now.
She avoided making eye contact. It surprised me that she seemed more nervous than upset. What the hell does she know? Wayne told you something else?
No, not Wayne.
Maggie chewed her lower lip.
I did some checking up on Chantal.
I coughed for the second verbal throat punch in as many minutes. Why?
Because I'm worried about you and Ella. Did you know she was married?
Blindsided and more than a little pissed, I stepped out of the shower. She's widowed. Maggie started to follow me out of the shower but stopped when I turned to face her.
Gabe,
You had no business poking into this.
I'm sorry, but I disagree. If you and that sweet little girl in there are going to be part of my life, I need to know what's going on.
She dipped her chin. I needed a few minutes to calm the fuck down before I said something stupid. Let's finish this in your room. I don't want to wake Ella.
All right.
I checked on my daughter, pulled on a pair of PJ pants, and second-guessed myself from every angle. I needed to tell her about Chantal, but first, I wanted to know what she'd found, where she'd dug it up, and why. Had Leo's guy misread her signals, or was there something else going on with her and Wayne? I crawled into her bed and stared at the ceiling. If we had to argue, I preferred to do it horizontally. Maggie came into the room and stretched out beside me, in nothing except her robe. This woman knew how to surprise the shit out of me, piss me off, and turn me on all at the same time. She snuggled against my side.
Promise me you'll file paperwork to establish legal paternity as soon as possible.
It's already in the works. I kissed her forehead. I put security on you because the situation with Chantal is getting out of hand.
How so?
She propped herself up on her elbow. She wants money before she signs the custody papers.
There's something you need to know. She sucked in her breath. Chantal was married to Martin Sinclair.
Tonight was a night of surprises, and I fucking hate surprises. I know.
Oh.
Maggie rolled to her back.
Of course you knew.
She's not responsible for the accident.
How do you know?
Her voice trembled. Because I was with her that night. I held my breath and waited for her to explode.
Your relationship with her, it's in the past, right?
Boom, another surprise. She didn't lose her shit. Yeah, of course.
Then it isn't any of my business. As long as you know the score, which you obviously do, and she isn't a psychopath out to hurt my family. She isn't, is she?
Physically, no, she's not the type.
Then why do I need security?
Maggie turned my head and forced me to look her in the eye. She threatened to tell you about the situation with Martin and my family. I chose my words carefully. Chantal had implied more, and yes, I needed to tell Maggie about the family business, but she'd had enough to process for one night. We both had.
If she's not a physical threat, I want you to call off the security guards. I don't like the idea of people following me around.
Done.
Any word from the attorney about Justin Trudeau?
After a conversation with Santiago, he's decided it's a bad idea to sue.
Because his wife would find out he was seeing other people?
Probably. I nuzzled into her chest. I'll never let anything happen to you.
I know, but
No buts, and no more snooping.
Gabe.
This time, I surprised her by pinning her to the bed and kissing her stupid.
Chapter 28. Maggie. While the conversation had gone better than I'd hoped, I still had questions. Earth-shattering questions. Despite what Wayne said, labels did matter. A shrewd businessman and a member of the millennial version of the mafia were two entirely different things. Are you a mobster? Simple as that. Why can't I spit out the words? Because if he tells me what I already know, I'll have to do something about it. This'll end, and I don't want it to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maggie, stop thinking and start kissing. Gabe nipped my earlobe. Before I had a chance to do as he asked, he moved down and drew my nipple into his mouth. I must have gasped, because he met my eyes and ran his tongue over the hardened flesh. Still thinking? He flashed me a grin hot enough to melt my lingering doubts. I can't remember. Did I give you that file of receipts? Maggie. Leaving a moist trail of kisses in his wake, Gabe worked his way down my body. How about now? Uh-huh. Thinking about the grocery list. He settled between my thighs and buried his face between my legs. No teasing, no warning, no nothing except his tongue and lips and teeth. Oh, God. I dug my heels into the mattress and raised my hips. He slid his hands under my butt and lifted my lower body from the bed. I had no choice but to give in. The position made it impossible for me to move. Gabe added fingers into the mix, and it took all my strength not to cry out. The man played my body like he played the guitar. Practice and skill and passion. I closed my eyes and counted backward from 10. Somewhere between 8 and 7, the orgasm crashed over me, but he wasn't finished. Stop, 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 I can't. I twisted and turned until he let me go. Gabe slid out of his flannel pants and climbed up my body until his face hovered above mine. Still want me to stop? No. I slid my hand down his chest and wrapped my hand around his length. I want this. He growled and lowered his mouth to mine, but otherwise remained still. While I felt as if I'd spontaneously combust, he seemed content to kiss me silly. The more I tried to speed things along, the more he teased. I curled my free hand in his long hair and tugged until he broke the kiss. I need you inside me now. Gabe fished around in the nightstand and came up with an empty box. Shit. Hang on. I have one in my wallet. Talk about a buzzkill. I pulled the sheet to my chin and tried really hard not to think. Unfortunately, it didn't work. He returned and waved the foil packet like a victory flag. Add condoms to your grocery list. This one was in my wallet. You better check the expiration date on that thing. I was only half teasing. He and Leo had both said he hadn't dated anyone since Chantal. He flipped the light on, studied the wrapper, and grinned. It's still good. But you're not. I licked my lips and motioned to his less-than-ready appendage. Come here, let me help you. As if by magic, the mere suggestion of a blowjob hardened his cock before he'd slid between the sheets. You were saying? Suited up and ready to go, he crawled on top of me. The world seemed to hinge on my next breath, his next move. We stayed still for a heartbeat. In torturous, slow motion, he pushed his hips forward and sank deep inside me. I clutched at his shoulders and bit my lip to keep the moan building in my throat from escaping. I felt him everywhere. His soapy scent, his still damp hair, his hard chest and soft hands. It was overwhelming. He was overwhelming. I couldn't focus on my pleasure and look at him at the same time. I closed my eyes and turned my head. Look at me, he whispered. My breath caught when I met his gaze. Gabe Marchionni, one of the strongest men I knew, had tears in his eyes. This time he looked away. Rather than telling him I understood, that I was in this with him, that he was my first and my last love, I wrapped my hand around the back of his head and pulled his face to mine. "I love you." Gabe nuzzled against my cheek, thrust a few more times, and released a shuddered breath. "I'll never let anything happen to you." "I love you too." My voice cracked. We'd said the words before, but this time I felt them in my soul. Heaven help me, I can't imagine my life without him. Our bodies still connected. He rolled us to the side and cocooned me in his arms. For the first time in a long while, I felt cherished. Ryan opened the bedroom door. "Aunt Maggie, I need you." My heart jumped into my throat. I scrambled to make sure all of the important parts were covered. "What's the matter?" Gabe mumbled something about locking the door. "I had a bad dream. Read me a story." He rubbed his eyes. "I'd love to. Go pick out a book and get in bed. I'll be right there." The boy nodded and shuffled back into the hall. I waited to make sure he'd gone and slid into my robe. "Stay here. I'll be back in 10 minutes. "Make it 5. Gabe rolled over and hugged my pillow. If I had to place bets, I'd wager he'd be fast asleep before I made it to Ryan's room. The boy sat in his bed with his favorite book in his lap. I eased in beside him and read about a little bird that lost his way home. When I'd finished, I leaned over to kiss the top of his head and smelled chocolate. I sniffed again. "Why do you smell like cake?" "Because I ate the icing." He squirmed away, but I pulled him close. "How much did you eat?" "Coco and I ate it all," Ryan whispered. "Then she threw up all over." I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Oh my. Then what happened? "Zach hurt his ankle, but he still made me take a bath." Ryan folded his arms and stuck out his lower lip. I poked his side until he giggled. "I don't think you got it all off. Did you use body wash?" "There isn't any, and Zach wouldn't let me use the shell soaps." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. "Which tub did you use?" "The one with the fancy towels." He yawned. I stood and pulled his Spider-Man comforter to his shoulders. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night." The closer I came to the bathroom, the greater my sense of doom. I opened the door and the aroma of chocolate almost knocked me over. It looked like Willy Wonka had set up shop. Brown goo covered the floor and walls and tub. No amount of bleach would save the pretty white guest towels. I smiled and closed the door. Mr. Wonderful didn't have things as under control as he wanted me to believe. He didn't do a better job at parenting than I did. He faked it better.
Chapter 29. Gabe. 3 weeks had passed since the last time I'd heard from Chantal. Her radio silence should have been a good thing, but I didn't trust it. She still hadn't signed the damn papers. While I didn't want to believe Chantal had tricked me into knocking her up to extort money, it made sense. One thing I knew for sure, women like Chantal didn't give up easily. In 4 days, the clock would run out on whatever game she was playing. 4 freaking days until the judge ruled on my petition for full custody of Ella. "Maggie, we're late for work." I'd paced a rut in the kitchen floor waiting for her. "Sorry, I was working on my novel and lost track of time." She handed Ella to Hildy, who I'd begged to come help with the kids. Hildy smiled, but I didn't. Maggie looked like hell. Her skin seemed paler, or maybe it was the dark circles under her eyes. She'd lost the little bounce in her step. Even her hair seemed to slouch. With Mardi Gras season in full swing, we'd worked long hours, and the days between now and Fat Tuesday would be even crazier. "Why don't you take the night off?" I pressed my hand to her forehead, but she batted it away. "I'm fine. Let's go." "You might want to change your shirt." I motioned to the spit up on her shoulder. Maggie groaned. "Dang it." Hildy said, "I always think it smells like week-old Alfredo sauce." Maggie choked out a laugh and went back down the hall to change. I texted Jessie to let her know we were running late. "Okay, I'm ready." Maggie returned to the kitchen wearing a long-sleeved t-shirt with the bar logo. We kissed the kids and headed for the car. Are you sure you aren't coming down with something?
Gabe, seriously, I'm fine.
She checked her reflection and sighed.
You're giving me a complex.
I worry. Sue me. I turned off the highway and navigated through the quarter. I spoke to Santiago today. The judge still hasn't made a final ruling on your case. Her eyes went all sort of watery. Babe, don't cry. It'll work out in our favor.
I hope so.
We're going to be busy tonight. I'll be behind the bar with you and Jessie.
Okay.
She gazed at my mouth and licked her lips. Don't look at me like that, or we'll never make it inside. I pulled into a spot in the alley behind the building.
Maybe that's my evil plan.
She hopped out of the car before I could reply. We aren't that late. I moved behind her and slid my hand under the front of her shirt as she punched the code into the keypad. 5 minutes won't hurt anything. I pushed her through the door with every intention of bending her over my desk. Unfortunately, it wasn't technically my desk anymore. Leo popped his head out of the office. Gabe, got a sec? Piss off, will you? I love my brother, but I fucking hated the situation. This was my bar. I'd worked my ass off to turn it around. I didn't want to run my father's business. I wanted Maggie and the kids and a life that didn't involve guns, money laundering, or murder. My brother and Maggie stared. I pressed my back against the wall and hung my head. This wasn't Leo's fault. My brother didn't want to manage the bar any more than I wanted to take over for my father. It was up to me to atone for decades of sins. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to snap at you. Don't worry about it. He ducked back into the office. Maggie kissed my cheek and handed me her purse.
We aren't blind. We can see losing the bar is tearing you apart. Talk to your father.
What's done is done. I watched her walk down the hall before heading into the office to lock up her bag and talk to Leo. She hadn't asked anything else about the family business, and I hadn't volunteered any information. Not yet. I'd planned to, but things were going too good to screw them up. Besides, I'd rather wait until I knew for sure I could break my brothers and me free of the Cosa Nostra once and for all. Leo glanced up when I came into the office. Nice handbag. Is that a Kate Spade? It's Maggie's, and I'm not in the mood to listen to you bust my balls about carrying her purse. He raised his hands in surrender. Who am I to judge? I spent hours this morning searching websites for poodle puppies. Of all the words I'd heard come out of my brother's mouth, those were the most bizarre. Tell me you're kidding. What can I say? The little fluff balls grew on me. I pinched the bridge of my nose to stave off an oncoming headache. The accountant is all settled into his new digs? Leo nodded. I get why you did it, but the risk. All is well that ends well. Maggie's phone rang for the 4th or 5th time since we'd left the house. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled the cell from the outside pocket. Leo's eyes rounded. I'd reconsider whatever it is you're considering, bro. I smirked and answered. Marchionni. The caller disconnected. My pulse sped as I scrolled through her call history. She's got 56 voicemails from a blocked number. Leo motioned to the drawer. Put the phone down and step away from the desk. You're entering dangerous territory. She said she's been getting threatening prank calls. I pressed play on a random message. Halfway through the obscenities, I hit delete and played another. This one made my blood boil. Some asshats leaving death threats. Leo snatched the phone from me and pressed it to his ear. He listened, scowled, and listened again. Jesus. I'll have someone in the office trace the calls and find the psycho. And then I'd see how the caller enjoyed real threats. The silver lining, if I could call it that, the female caller didn't sound like Chantal. Speaking of psychos, any word from your baby mama? I dragged my hand over my face. Nothing. He nodded and drummed his fingers. Listen, what Maggie said in the hall was right. I've been talking to Enzo. You have a family now. It makes more sense for him to work with Pops. He's hungry for it and has less to lose if things go south. Thanks, bro. I appreciate it, but I'm up to my balls in it now. Besides, Enzo's more likely to keep us in than get us out. I loved him for making the suggestion, but I couldn't shirk my responsibilities. With Joe gone, I was the oldest. This was my cross to bear. A cross I intended to throw into the wood chipper at the first opportunity. He pressed his lips together and nodded. I've been going over the books. Tell me again why you don't take credit cards. I gave him what I hoped was a patient stare. He shrugged. I'm just saying, it's all about customer service. I lowered my voice. Our largest customers are in Sicily. He furrowed his brow, but the freaking light bulb came on over his head. Right. It's harder to launder money with a paper trail. Once again, my blood pressure shot through the roof. How do you not know that? You run a Marchionni Corp-owned business. Am I the only one up to my ass in illegal shit? Leo grimaced. It's impossible to run a restaurant on a cash basis. But it takes a lot of food and other products to run a restaurant. We get more than our fair share of deliveries, if you know what I mean. I gotcha. My stomach turned. I understood all too well. New Orleans was a port city and easily accessible to Central and South America. Leo and Enzo were importing a lot more than fruit and vegetables. I better get out there. The girls are probably swamped. Sure thing. Leo turned his attention back to the computer. Less than an hour later, people packed into every nook and cranny of the place. Maggie, Jesse, and I struggled to keep up, but I loved every second of it. Almost every second of it. I could do without Detective Wayne O'Malley growing roots on the stool in front of Maggie's workstation. Wayne motioned to her, then tapped his watch, signaling he wanted to close his tab.
Leaving already?
Maggie cleared his empty glass. Yeah, I have an early day tomorrow. He set a 20 on the bar.
I'll get your change.
Keep it. Wayne turned and disappeared into the crowd. I don't like the way he looks at you. I punched an order into the computer.
Who?
She cocked a brow. That detective. Maggie grinned and shook her head.
He isn't looking at me.
Then who the hell is he looking at? Before I could sort it out, a busty redhead waved cash in my face. What can I get you? She said something, but I didn't catch it. Come again? The woman planted her elbows in the bar and leaned close enough I could count the freckles on her breasts. Not that I was looking.
Jack and Coke.
Maggie rolled her eyes and moved to the next customer. I nodded and took the redhead's money, but she grabbed my hand and damn near pulled me across the bar top.
What time do you get off?
Drunk women hitting on bartenders was an occupational hazard. I'd learned early on it was best not to shoot them down outright. Instead, I laughed and shook my head. Not until dawn.
I could get you off right now.
She slurred her words.
Your fiancé is about ready to kick your ass,
Jesse whispered in my ear. I glanced past her to Maggie and wished I hadn't. The look she gave me could have frozen all 9 layers of hell. The redhead wrote something on a napkin, kissed it, then pressed it into my hand.
Call me.
Maggie tossed a rag on the counter.
I need to go on break.
Shit. I tossed the napkin in the trash and turned to follow her.
Let her go,
Jesse laughed. You're enjoying this?
Oh, yeah. It's about time you met your match.
10 minutes later, Maggie returned, dressed like my cousin. Actually, I'd bet my right nut she'd rummaged through the spare clothes Jesse kept him back. Not that any of that mattered. Not when she looked smoking in a room full of drunk guys. The short denim skirt barely covered her ass, and she tied the got beads tank top in a knot to show off her midriff. Not only was she showing serious skin, she'd applied makeup. The look would have seemed slutty, but the little temptress had woven her hair into twin French braids. Fuck me. She looked like a cross between a rocker Barbie and a schoolgirl. Thank Christ she didn't change out of her combat boots. On second thought, the shit kickers look hot. Too damned hot. She smirked, returned to her station, and got to work. Maggie. She ignored me. Smiling, she tucked a 20 into her bra and poured a drink. I pulled her to the side. What are you doing?
Working on the kids' college funds.
She's paying me back for the redhead. I don't like it. She twirled her braid around her finger.
You don't like it?
I freaking died. How in the hell did she expect me to work with a raging heart-on? No, you look distracting.
Then don't look at me.
She turned and took another order. Oh, hell no. I wasn't about to let her get the last laugh. She might have changed her clothes, but this was Maggie. My Maggie. She was more comfortable in a pew than on a pole. I scooted past her and grabbed her ass. I don't mean a pinch. I mean I slid my hands under the denim and took 2 handfuls. She yelped and turned to me as if dumbstruck. Get back to work. I motioned to the waiting customers. Closing time had come and gone. Stressed and exhausted, I wanted to go home. Unfortunately, everyone else wanted to hang around the empty bar and gab about my life. I sat between Leo and Maggie and watched with rapt fascination as she attempted to open a locked set of handcuffs with a bobby pin. He whispered, "She's doing field research for her book." Maggie shoved the pin into the lock, twisted it, and frowned.
The entire situation with the bar is ridiculous. Right?
Dahlia huffed. As Leo's friend, I figured she'd heard her fair share of my brother's bitching.
I don't understand why Papa Joe insists that Leo run this place. He has his hands full with the restaurant.
Dahlia was a looker. Jet black hair, pale skin, and a body like a supermodel. What the hell was Leo waiting for? They seemed into each other from day one, and that was almost 10 years ago.
Do you guys always do what Papa Joe tells you to do?
Maggie glanced between me and Leo. I pinched her leg under the table. This conversation didn't need to happen in front of witnesses. Besides, I was more interested in going home and trying out the handcuffs.
Almost always.
Jessie unclipped her hair and gave her head a quick shake. Growing up, she'd spent so much time at my folks that I thought of her more like a kid sister than a cousin. Maggie perked up.
Jessie, you ran the place before. Have you thought about taking over for Gabe? Women in this family only work until they have babies, if they work at all. That's ridiculous.
She glanced at me as if for confirmation. Pops is old school. So is Jessie's father.
So, Maggie, if the whole writing thing doesn't work out, you could become a dominatrix or maybe join the police academy?
Jessie winked, easing the tension at the table. Like hell. I jabbed my index finger into Jessie's ribs. Maggie rolled her eyes.
He's right. I would stink at both. This is research. My main character is shackled and has to escape. It's much harder than I'd hoped.
Let's practice at home. In bed. The woman stunned the hell out of me by looking from my face to my cock and back again. I took her hand and pulled her to her feet. Time to go. Dahlia sipped her wine.
Maggie, you have to get dressed for the gala with us. The guys can't see us before the big reveal. It's a tradition.
Son of a bitch. I'd forgotten to tell her about the party.
Mardi Gras gala. Aren't we working?
She glanced at me. I'd screwed up. Big time.
No way. We're all expected to be at the gala. Gabe closes early that night.
Jessie gave me a dirty look.
You didn't tell her?
The gala was one of the largest social events of the year, hosted by none other than my father. We've been busy. Dahlia gave me an equally dirty look and turned to Maggie.
Have you ordered your gown? I'm not much of a gala person.
She tossed the unlocked cuffs on the table.
Nonsense. I even scored a ticket for Shauna. You have to come. It won't be the same without you.
Dahlia glanced between me and Maggie.
I might be able to squeeze into one of Rebecca's old dresses.
She chewed her lower lip.
Oh, no you won't. I'm going to take you shopping. Face it, Maggie, people know you two are engaged. They will expect to see you on his arm, looking good.
Dahlia turned to Leo.
I'd murder you in your sleep if you forgot to tell me about something like this.
Maggie sighed.
It's no big deal. I doubt we can get a sitter on Fat Tuesday anyway.
I squeezed her hand, thankful she didn't seem too upset. She'd said we. Ready to get home? She nodded, but I had the feeling I had some serious explaining to do. The ride home sucked. I didn't know what to say, so I drove while she stared out the window. Apologize before this gets out of hand. I'm sorry. I should have asked you. I assumed you'd say no. I know how you feel about my folks.
I don't know what this is between us.
The muscle in my jaw tensed. I thought we'd gotten past the point of running for safety every time one of us stepped on the other's feelings. What do you want it to be?
Part of me wants it all. The church, the white picket fence, the happily ever after.
And part of you doesn't? My chest tightened. Having this conversation behind the wheel was asking for trouble. I slowed and pulled into an empty parking lot. She shifted to face me.
I'm scared history will repeat itself.
So am I, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I slid my fingers between hers and kissed the back of her hand.
Me too.
She waved her hand.
I'm tired and moody and ready for a shower.
A bolt of electricity zipped through me. Hope. This woman had just handed me a gift-wrapped package of hope that we'd make it. Will you go to the gala with me?
No, but I'll meet you there.
What? Why?
You heard Dahlia? You have to pick me out of the crowd or something.
Honey, I'd recognize you anywhere, but I'll play along. I leaned across the console. She met me in the middle. I chuckled. I couldn't help it. She looked so damn cute with eyes half closed and lips parted in those freaking braids. Did you want something? I want you. I cupped her face. If all you're going to do is use me for sex, we may as well be married. Maggie licked her lips.
Married people don't have sex.
I cocked one brow and did my best imitation of The Rock. We will.
Everyone thinks that. Then they get married and the well dries up.
I, for one, plan to test this theory every night for the rest of my life. I couldn't stand to be wrong, nor could I stand another second ticking by before I kissed her smart mouth.
Chapter 30. Maggie. Though Fat Tuesday was days away, my early afternoon shift had dragged on and on and on. I sat behind the bar and reread the final draft of the Bourbon Street Bad Boys articles. While I didn't have a firm deadline, Marlena had hoped to have it last week. However, I hadn't had a clue what I would write until the conversation with Dahlia and Leo 2 nights ago. I shifted my weight in an effort to relieve the ache in my lower back. Tired from too little sleep and too much Gabe. I'd stopped for coffee on my way in, but it had made me queasy. Weird, considering I practically lived on the stuff. I hit send on the email and closed my laptop. I'd gone way off the script from the proposal, but I was proud of my work. I only hoped Gabe liked it too. The same blonde I'd caught in the break room weeks ago slid onto a stool. Maggie, right? That's me. I smiled, though it always freaked me out a little when the patrons knew my name. I thought it was you. You don't remember me. How could you? I mean, it's been a year. I'm Lindsay, a friend of Rebecca's. We met at the funeral. Why is she just now introducing herself? You've been in here quite a bit. Yes, but I wasn't sure you were the same person. I saw the announcement in the paper. Congratulations. Thanks. My voice came out breathy. I decided to pick my battles with Evelyn. While I didn't appreciate her putting my personal business in the newspaper, she was Gabe's mom. I read in the paper that you're engaged to Joe's brother. She tilted her head to the side as if studying my reaction. Nope, not discussing my life with someone I hardly know. Corona with lime? Not this early. Diet Coke, please. Lindsay put her elbows on the bar. How are the kids? I bet they're getting big. I filled a glass with ice and soda and set it in front of her. They're doing great. If you don't mind me asking, are you okay? I saw him put his hands on you the other night. Gabe and I'd worked every night for 2 weeks straight. I had no idea what she referred to. When? A couple nights ago. You'd changed clothes. He seemed angry. Oh, no. We were goofing around. I forced a smile, unable to imagine my sister befriending someone so awkward. I only ask because I do advocacy for abused women. She sipped her drink. I laughed before I could stop myself. I'm fine, really. When's the wedding? We haven't set a date. Hoping she'd stop the interrogation if I looked busy, I went into the back and returned with a bag of limes. The blonde motioned to my hand. You don't have a ring? Not yet. I slammed the knife through the fruit. How did you know my sister? Oh, we met at Chloe's preschool. Rebecca and I visited while the girls had play dates. That makes sense. You can't choose mom friends like you do friend friends. Does your daughter go to Chloe's school? Oh, no. We can't afford Sacred Heart. She seemed offended by the thought. I can't either. Her grandparents insisted. Do you have a picture of Chloe? I'd like to share it with Ainsley. I left my phone in the back. Why don't you text a picture of your daughter, and I'll respond with one of Chloe. I'm sure she'd get a kick out of seeing her photo. Lindsay hesitated. You're a mother now. You should have your phone on you at all times. Let's go get it. Before I could sort out the weird request, Dahlia and Shauna arrived, both women dressed to the nines. I took one look at them and groaned. I totally forgot we were supposed to go shopping today. You're going. Dahlia made sitting at a bar stool look graceful. I'm not ashamed to admit I envied her long legs. Shauna wore a smirk and a little black dress. Did you bring a change of clothes? I shook my head. I forgot all about it this morning. Can we do this another day? You'll be lucky to find an off-the-rack gown as it is. The gala's this weekend. I ordered my dress 6 months ago. Face it, honey. It's today or never. Dahlia glanced at Shauna as if expecting her to agree. She's right. This late, everything will be picked over. Lindsay smiled, seemingly unaware she'd butted into their conversation. Shauna glanced from Lindsay to me with a what the hell expression. Dahlia didn't seem bothered. That, or she had better manners. Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Dahlia. Lindsay, nice to meet you. I name-dropped us into an appointment at Harold Clark, Shauna said, ignoring the other conversation. Whose name did you drop? I put the cut lime wedges in a container and stuffed it into the mini fridge. Yours, of course, and I happened to mention your fiancé. Perfect. As a general rule, I hated shopping. Nothing fits the way it should when you're short and busty. Give me a few minutes to clean up. In the time it took me to freshen up, Lindsay had wrangled an invitation to go shopping with us. I found it weird. Judging by Shauna's expression and constant eye-rolling, she agreed. Dahlia, on the other hand, seemed too excited to care. We arrived at the dress shop 5 minutes past our appointment time, but I didn't think our tardiness had caused the salesperson's sour expression. The woman glanced from my beat-up boots to my messy bun and frowned. It reminded me of the scene from Pretty Woman, except I'd brought friends and, well, I wasn't a prostitute. Shauna did the talking while I browsed the dresses on display. A pit formed in my stomach. A pit that threatened to swallow me from the inside out. Generally speaking, if the menu didn't have prices, I couldn't afford the food. I assumed dress shops operated under the same principle. Ladies. An older woman motioned for us to follow her into a sitting area near the dressing rooms. She turned to Dahlia and smiled. You must be Mary Margaret. Oh, God, can this get any more embarrassing? I raised my hand. I'm Maggie. The woman's smile faltered. What size are you, dear? Yes, it could get more embarrassing. A 12. The woman tittered. Why don't we take some measurements? You don't look like a size 12, though it's hard to say in those baggy clothes. I followed her behind one of the drapes like an obedient puppy. I just got off work. Please call me Claire, and don't worry about it. We'll get you taken care of. I understand you need a couple of cocktail dresses as well as the formal. No, just the formal. Oh? I spoke to Mr. Marchionni this afternoon. He said to assure you that he would take care of everything. Claire smiled, and I swear I saw dollar signs in her eyes. His instructions were clear. My heart fell to my knees. Which Mr. Marchionni had agreed to pay for my dresses? It had to be Papa Joe because I couldn't imagine Gabe caring what I wore. Okay. I'll be right back. Claire left me sitting in the dressing room wearing a lavender silk robe and chewing on my bottom lip. Shauna and Dahlia talked in hushed tones outside. I poked my head out of the drapes. What are you guys talking about? You, of course. Dahlia laughed. Lindsay glanced at the other two and nodded with a bright smile. Too bright. I did my best not to think about her. I hated to be mean, but the woman gave me the creeps. Shauna, did you know they called Papa Joe and asked about payment? Shauna hitched a shoulder. They called Gabe. My mouth fell open. He wants you to pick out a dress for tonight, too, Dahlia said. What's tonight? I knew I hadn't forgotten plans with Gabe. We didn't date, we played house. Before they could answer, Claire returned with an armful of dresses. I must have turned 8 shades of red when Claire stayed in the dressing room. While I appreciated the assistance with zippers and such, I wished I hadn't left home wearing a ratty old bra and Hello Kitty panties. First, I tried on a sleek black sheath dress with a deep V-neck. It was awful. Half my bra hung out and my boobs looked deflated. "Let me get you something that will help." Claire stepped out of the room. I stared in the mirror, imagining what my mother would say about this dress. Nadine would not approve. Claire returned with a strapless bra and proceeded to help me into it. It fit perfectly. No binding in the back and no boob spillage over the cups. When I pulled the dress up again, it looked like a different garment altogether. Wow. I leaned closer to the mirror, then turned sideways. My tummy had flattened, waist narrowed, and my breasts, holy moly. The stress diet was working. "Would you like to show your friends?" "Heck yes." "Sure." I followed the woman out into the sitting area. Dahlia clapped and Shauna gasped. "Oh, Maggie, that's gorgeous." "It's simple, but stunning." Dahlia motioned for me to turn. Watching my reflection in the mirror, I spun in a slow circle. "I'll take this one." Another woman rolled a rack of 5 or 6 gowns outside her dressing room. I took one look at them, and the room tilted. Cocktail dresses were one thing. Formal wear made me want to run for the door. "You look frightened. We'll do this one at a time, dear." Claire patted my shoulder. I tried all 6 gowns on, but none of them fit. Too short, too long, too boobish, too matronly. It was a disaster. Claire hung the last reject on its hanger. "Excuse me a moment. I have some things in back that you may like." While the saleswoman hurried to a different part of the store, I popped my head out to talk to my friends. "Where's Lindsay?" "She had to go," Shauna said. "Seriously, Maggie, hasn't anyone ever told you not to pick up strays?" "She's harmless," Dahlia said. "She's weird," Shauna replied. No sense in arguing with the truth. "I agree, she's odd." Claire returned, and I went back into the dressing room. "I think I have the perfect dress for you, but I have some questions first." Her smile lit her eyes. "All right." I stared at the garment bag, praying this one would do the trick. "We don't want to put you in something that's the same shape as your wedding gown. Have you chosen one yet?" I reached for the wall for support. The mere mention of wedding dresses made my already queasy stomach lurch. "Would you humor me and agree to wear a mermaid fit for your wedding? With your hourglass figure, it would be breathtaking." "Can I wear a strapless with my bust size?" "Not all mermaids are strapless. I envision you in a halter neckline, mermaid bottom, very old Hollywood." That sounds perfect. Years before, I'd spent days poring over bridal magazines with my sister. I knew the lingo well enough to picture the dress. "Good. Next question." Claire hesitated, as if nervous to ask. "Would you consider lightening your hair to a paler shade of blonde?" I glanced at the mirror at my dark blonde hair. I'd never colored it. "Do you think it would look better?" "It would brighten your complexion and bring out your eyes." "Sure, why not?" "I'll call my guy. He's the best. Do you have time to do it this afternoon? You'll want it done as soon as possible. I wouldn't suggest waiting until the day before the gala." "Let me ask." I pulled the curtain aside. "Do I have time to get my hair done today?" "Yes, for all 3 of us. Shauna has to get the red out of her hair or she'll look like a Christmas tree in her green dress," Dahlia said. I turned back to Claire. "Would you ask if the salon has time for 3 appointments?" "Let me make a call." Claire seemed too excited. She walked to the other salesperson and whispered something to her. When she returned, she rubbed her hands together and grinned. The next time I came out of the dressing room, I practically floated on a cloud of filmy fabric. This is the one. The dress draped in a Grecian style that left my shoulders bare and gathered at my wrists in woven silver bangles. The matching belt made my waist look tiny, yet didn't feel confining. Best of all, the color gradually faded from silvery white to the same robin's egg blue as my eyes. Claire handed me a delicate metal mask in the same silver as the belt and bracelets. One large white plume sprang from the side of the mask, sparkling with tiny crystals. "Oh, Maggie." Shauna brought her hands to her mouth. No, you can't wear that or you'll upstage me," Dahlia grinned. I stared at myself in the mirror, speechless. Claire knelt to check the hem. "Once she lightens her hair, with her pale skin and blue eyes, she will look like a Nordic queen." Shauna and Dahlia stood and admired the gown close up. I couldn't tear my gaze from the mirror. "Do you think Gabe will like it?" "Yes, it's perfect." Shauna embraced me. "Careful. If I didn't know better, I'd think you'd soften toward Gabe." She wrinkled her nose. "I have to like the big jerk. He makes you happy." "I have one more for her to try on." Claire helped me down from the platform. "This is the one. I don't think you can top it." I followed her into the dressing room. She pulled a silk scarf from her pocket. "I don't want you to see yourself until I'm finished." Part of me wanted to get the heck out of there, but she'd piqued my curiosity. I sat while she tied the scarf over my eyes. Nearly blind, I had no choice but to allow Claire to put me into the next dress. The woman fastened something on my head, and I knew she'd put me in a wedding gown. I trembled as Claire led me to the platform. Behind me, my friends gasped and whispered. Claire untied the scarf. I almost fainted. I wore the dress Claire had described as old Hollywood glam. The sapphires and diamonds around my neck probably cost more than a house. The silky fabric shimmered in the light, hugging every curve. I turned to see the back of the gown and fell in love. It dipped low with pearl buttons running from my lower back to the end of the fluted skirt. No lace, no fussy embroidery, just ruching across the bodice, hips, and thighs. "What do you think?" Claire tilted her head. I burst into tears. Claire's mouth moved wordlessly before she managed to speak. "It's all right, dear. A lot of women cry the first time."
Chapter 31. Gabe. At 7 o'clock sharp, a limo stopped in front of the salon. I'd waited my entire life for tonight, and I wanted it to be perfect. I'd shaved and dusted off my favorite Armani suit for the occasion. Hell, I'd enlisted the help of a saleswoman to convince Maggie to buy a cocktail dress. I opened the glass door. No matter how beautiful the salon, they all smelled the same, like chemicals and incense. Both made my nose twitch. Shauna and Dahlia smiled, and the guy standing beside them looked like he'd eat me alive given half the chance, but I didn't see Maggie. I took several steps forward before my brain clicked in and zeroed in on the platinum blonde bombshell in the tight black dress. Until that moment, I would have thought it impossible for her to look more beautiful, but she blew me away. Maggie took a step forward and smiled. My pulse beat a cadence loud enough to drown out the chatter around me. I dipped my chin to hide my grin and held my hand out toward her. Her smile went straight to my heart. She took several quick steps, glanced over her shoulder at her friends, and slowed her pace. The little devil. I bet they'd coached her on how to walk in stilettos. I motioned for her to turn. Maggie stopped and spun in a slow circle. "Do you like my hair? The sales lady at the dress shop suggested I lighten it for the gala. Is it too much for a mother of four?" "You look amazing. And who says mothers of four can't be sexy?" I needed to get her to dinner fast, or I'd throw the plan out the window and take her straight to the hotel. I set my hand on the small of her back and guided her to the limo. "Where are we going?" She slid across the leather seat. "I'd like to take you home and peel that dress off." I traced a line from her knee to her inner thigh. Maggie grabbed my hand. "Later. I'm starved. Wherever we're going, I hope food is involved." I knocked once on the glass separating us from the driver, and the limo pulled from the curb. I couldn't stop touching her. "I love the dress. Did you find something for the gala?" "Yes, but—" Maggie lowered her eyes. "I spent a lot of money today." "I don't mind." I hooked my finger under her chin and brushed my lips across hers. "It's worth every penny to see you happy." I let the salespeople talk me into a few things I don't really need. "Maggie, stop worrying. I wouldn't have given them permission to charge me if I didn't want to spoil you. Where are your bags?
Shauna's taking them to her place. We're getting dressed for the gala there.
You should get dressed at home, with me.
I want to surprise you.
The limo came to a stop, and she peeked out the dark glass at a wrought iron gate.
Where are we?
You're not the only one who's full of surprises. My voice cracked like that of a 14-year-old kid. I had to get a hold of my nerves before I ended up making a fool of myself. I stepped out of the car before the driver came around. Music floated over the brick walls, and the aroma of our dinner made my stomach growl, loud. Maggie took my hand.
Seems I'm not the only one who skipped lunch.
I've been busy today. Lame, Gabe. Real lame. You took my breath away in the salon. I barely recognized you. Her cheeks turned a pretty shade of pink.
Thanks.
Full disclosure, I asked Claire to talk you into going to the salon.
Why?
Maggie's mouth fell open. Because I wanted you to feel beautiful. I ran my thumb over her lower lip. There's nothing wrong with taking a little time to yourself. She blushed again and glanced out the window.
Where are we?
Enzo uses this for special events. I led her through the gate and into a private courtyard. A fountain bubbled in the center of the space, and various types of flowers and trees lined the perimeter. A single table with a white cloth sat under a canopy of twinkling lights. Enzo's people had outdone themselves. I pulled out her chair. Once she sat, I nodded to the musicians. The soulful blues music quieted to a conversational volume. Perfect. So far, so damn good.
You did all of this for me?
She glanced from the pale pink roses on the table to the candles burning throughout the garden. Yes. I hoped what I lacked in words I made up for in effort. I needed her to know she was the most precious thing on this earth to me.
Thank you. I'm overwhelmed.
We don't get out much. I wanted to make tonight special. I pulled a piece of paper from my jacket and handed it to her.
What's this?
The ink had barely had time to dry on the court order. It's temporary for 6 months. Then Ella's legally mine. Maggie squealed, jumped from her chair, and hugged me.
That's awesome!
1 down, 2 to go. I kissed her lips, but pulled away before things crossed from PG to rated R. Dinner first. We have plenty of time for that later.
What time did you tell your mother we'd pick up the kids?
Maggie eased into her chair. 10 in the morning. We have a room at the Monteleone. The look in her eyes made my cock sit up and take notice. I'd never make it through dinner at this rate. A waiter came forward and filled our wine glasses, while another poured water. When they finished, another came forward and presented the first course. Dungeness crab, gratiné. God bless Enzo. I nodded my approval. Food now, sex later. Did you enjoy your day?
Not as much as you did.
Grinning, she sipped her wine. Everything all right at the bar? What am I doing? I had important things to discuss with her, and here I was making small talk.
Busy for an afternoon.
It's that time of year. Thanks again for covering the shift.
I met a strange woman. She said she knew Rebecca from Chloe's preschool. She's been in a few times. She ended up coming shopping with us tonight.
Did you recognize her? I sat back in my chair.
No. She seemed awkward. Not the kind of woman Rebecca would have befriended.
Be careful. Your name's been in the paper, and you can learn a lot about a person online. I hate to say it, but the bar brings out the crazies. It's not a good idea to let bar patrons into your personal life, including shopping trips. Maggie nodded and looked away. The harassing calls you've been getting. I had someone in IT security put a tracker on your phone. Her mouth fell open.
What? How?
I borrowed it one morning while you were writing. I don't pretend to know how it all works, but the guy was able to trace the calls. Do you know anyone who works at the Hilton on St. Charles Avenue?
No.
Pleasantly surprised she hadn't taken my head off for stealing her phone, I eased forward and drew her hand. We've contacted the general manager for a list of employees. We'll find out who's doing this and put an end to it.
Thank you. Between the calls, the woman at the bar, the dress shopping, I'm a wreck.
She pulled away and pushed her food around on her plate.
What else did you do today, besides get one step closer to keeping Ella forever?
I visited my father and went over some contracts, though my mind wasn't in it. I took a bite, but while delicious, the buttery crab hit my stomach hard. I needed to steer the conversation to happier topics quick, or I'd blow the entire night.
What were you thinking about? Ella?
You. Tonight. Us. The waiters returned with fresh glasses and a new bottle of wine. I lifted my glass, swirled it, smelled it, and took a sip before nodding to the sommelier. He filled Maggie's glass, and another staff person served the main course of broccoli agnolotti and striped bass with braised cipollini onions. Maggie sipped her wine and smiled.
Are you feeling better about the job?
Yes and no. It's not as much fun as the bar, but the hours are good, and it forces me to use my brain.
So, you're not just a pretty face?
She laughed and took a bite of her fish. I've been told I'm pretty good in the sack, too. I met her gaze, and neither of us looked away. The staring contest ended with Maggie lowering her eyes and me chuckling. I loved this woman. Maggie cleared her throat.
Why not let Jessie take over? She's more than capable.
If it were up to me, I'd make her managing partner and keep a piece for myself. Unfortunately, that isn't how my father does business.
Your father's retiring.
And when he does, things will change. Until then, I'll deal. I pulled a second envelope from my pocket. For you. She unfolded the handwritten letter and pressed her hand to her chest.
Is this legal?
Santiago filed it, along with a motion to dismiss my parents' case against you. She blinked back tears.
Your mother wrote this? About me? Did you ask her to?
Evelyn Marchionni hated two things, Protestants and admitting she was wrong, but she'd done just that. It was her idea. She's impressed with the way you accepted Ella as if she were your own. Not to mention, she's thrilled you civilized me. Maggie started to speak, but my phone interrupted her.
You should answer.
I turned the sound off and slid it back into my pocket. Not tonight. I managed to get a couple of bites of my fish down before my cell vibrated again. She raised a brow. Ignore it, please. Enjoy your dinner. The third time it rang, Maggie sighed.
At least check voicemail. Something could be wrong with the kids.
You're right. I scrolled through my call log and the phone buzzed in my hand. This time my father was on the line. Hey, Pops, everything okay? No, everything is not okay. I received a call from Scott at the Picayune. There's an article about the family coming out in the paper tomorrow. I stood and walked away from the table. You mean about the business? I mean exactly what I said. Someone wrote an expose on the family. Son of a bitch. Why tonight? I drew a breath but couldn't stop shaking. My father had ordered the execution of an employee over breakroom gossip. What would he do to a journalist who dared to investigate the family? How bad is it? I haven't read it, but he's said it's personal. He agreed to squash it and find out who the hell's been poking around, but it's going to cost us. I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait until morning? He went into a coughing fit that had the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. When he came back on the line, he could barely speak. Could the Guthrie girl have done this? No, it wasn't her. Be here at 10 in the morning. He disconnected. I glanced back to Maggie. She couldn't have, could she?
Everything okay?
She started to rise. I motioned for her to sit and return to my chair. Problem with work. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow.
Are you sure?
Positive. I signaled for the staff to clear our plates. I needed to get this done before anything else blew up tonight. One refilled their wine while the other whisked the dishes away. Once they left the courtyard, I reached for her hand. Maggie furrowed her brow.
You're trembling.
I'm okay.
You're not yourself tonight. What's wrong?
I kissed her knuckles. There are some things I need to say to you.
Chapter 32. Maggie. I'd finished the article, pulled a shift at the bar, went dress shopping, had a makeover, and received some amazing news, but I was exhausted. More so, I was worried about Gabe. He stared at me with the oddest expression. If I didn't know him so well, I'd have thought he had a case of the nerves. His stiff posture differed from his typical laid-back style. Maybe it was the clothes. After all, I sat straighter in the dress than I would in jeans. No, it's not the suit. Something's wrong. He kissed the back of my hand. There are some things I need to say to you. I nodded, confused and somewhat frightened. I'd never seen this side of him. Sure, he'd been melancholy and introspective when he'd first showed up on my doorstep, but I blamed that on becoming an instant father. He'd gone back to his normal self within a couple of weeks. You probably already figured out that my family is old-fashioned. My brothers and I may be wild, but we honor our parents. We tease each other mercilessly, but we don't betray or disrespect our own. My throat tightened. He found out about the article. No matter how I'd spun it, the Marchionnis would see airing family secrets as the ultimate betrayal. Gabe, Let me finish, please. I nodded again, but I couldn't look him in the eye. My parents have been married for 54 years. We don't do divorce. We have big families, we work hard, play hard, and love with everything we have. When I found out about Ella, I thought of you. Not because I wanted a place to dump my problems, because I wanted to share my daughter with you. It killed me to stay away from you after Joe and Rebecca died. Knowing you were close and I couldn't see you was torture. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to tell him the truth. Gabe, there's something you need to know. He released my hand. I wrote an article about your family. He recoiled as if I'd struck him. My brain worked faster than my mouth. I had to explain, to tell him what I'd written, to make him understand why I'd done it. It isn't what you think, it's a personal piece. I know. He spoke in a shaky whisper. How do you know? I leaned back in my chair to put some distance between us. That's what the phone calls were about. My father's contact at the Picayune gave him a heads up. He ran his hand over the back of his neck and shook his head. What have you done? My job. I did my job. What do you mean a heads up? What guy? He set his elbows on the table and steepled his fingers. Think about it. How many news articles have you seen published about my family or our business? None. My mouth went dry. None because Papa Joe paid people to kill the stories before they went public. The part of me that believed in freedom of speech and freedom of the press balked. But damn it, this was Gabe and my principles would wait. What I wrote, it wasn't about Marchionni Corporation or the mob or any... His brows rose. I'd said too much, or maybe I'd said enough at the wrong time. Either way, I needed a rewind button. I mean, has he read the article? I think you're both overreacting. It's about a first generation of Italian immigrants walking the line between... It's going to kill him when he finds out it was you. He rolled his lips in and closed his eyes. Fuck, Maggie. You're not listening to me. It's not that bad. It's more of a human interest piece than an expose, and I wrote under a pen name. A little voice inside me screamed to ask him about the mafia outright. I knew the answer, but knowing and understanding the implications were two different things. I need a drink. He signaled to the servers. One came forward with a bottle of wine. Another waiter brought 2 plates, which I assumed were dessert. Just the wine for now. Scotch if you can get it, Gabe said to the waiter. The man hesitated and turned, but not before I spotted the chocolate truffles. I not only wanted them, I needed them with every fiber of my being. Chocolate would give me courage. Actually, I would like dessert now. The waiter looked between us. Later. Gabe motioned for the man to go. Don't be ridiculous, leave them on the table. No sense in making him walk back and forth. The waiter gave in and set a plate in front of me. I popped one into my mouth. Gabe groaned, sank back into his chair, and covered his face with his arm. I froze mid-chew. This isn't how tonight was supposed to go. While we're on the subject of your father, I need to ask you... I glanced at the dessert plate and blinked. Nestled between the truffles was the biggest diamond I'd ever seen. My world tilted. Gabe? Yeah, I know. The courtyard, the new dress, the music, the private dinner, his speech. I'd ruined his proposal. Oh my God. Gabe dropped his hand from his eyes and smiled. This is for real? You're asking me for real? Feeling lightheaded, I pushed my chair back and bent forward. It may not have been ladylike to put my head between my knees, but I did it anyway. Gabe knelt in front of me.
Mary Margaret Guthrie, I've been in love with you from the moment I first saw you. I love your smile, your laugh, your goofy glasses and ratty pajamas.
Please stop talking. I shook my head.
I haven't asked yet.
He curled his finger under my chin and lifted until I met his gaze.
Will you marry me?
I wanted to say yes more than anything, but it wasn't just me. I had children to consider. I had to know the truth. Are the Marchionnis a mafia family? His expression darkened.
Does it matter?
It doesn't change the fact that I love you. But I can't accept your proposal until I know what you're asking me to marry into. He turned his head, nodded, and looked back to me.
We are part of the Cosa Nostra, but I'm working on changing that, and your article has complicated things tremendously.
A million questions danced through my head. Was he a criminal? What kind? Could he quit? Would it put him or our family in danger? Could we go home and talk about this?
Sweetheart, there are things I can never share with you, but I will tell you as much as I can.
Would that be enough for me? Did Rebecca know?
Yes.
I ran through everything I knew about my sister, her marriage, her husband, their life, and came up with even more questions. I need time to sort this out.
I understand.
He kissed my cheek, stood, and walked toward the gate. Wait! I shot to my feet but had to grab the table to stay upright. Where are you going?
I need to take a walk. The driver will take you home when you're ready.
Shoulders slumped and head down, he looked defeated. I wanted to go to him to apologize, to tell him I'd marry him tonight, but I couldn't do any of those things. Wait, please come home with me. He stopped walking, but kept his back to me.
Mags, I'm not giving up on us. But right now, I need to handle the situation with the article before my father finds out you wrote it.
If you both would read it...
He won't care what it says. The fact you wrote it is a betrayal.
To him or to you. You forgot the ring. My voice trembled.
Keep it until you decide.
Gabe slipped through the gate, leaving me alone with the waitstaff and the weight of the world. I knew what I had to do. I slipped the ring on my finger, wrapped the remainder of the truffles in a napkin, and headed for the limo. After giving the driver the address to the Marchionni mansion in the Garden District, I sent Evelyn an email with my article attached. Gabe's mother had been a pain in my butt since my sister died, but no one could accuse her of not wanting the best for her sons. The car came to a stop in front of the imposing Greek Revival house, and my nerves kicked into high gear. What if she hadn't received the email? Should I have sent a text, called? Deciding to wait until morning, I knocked on the glass to get the driver's attention. Unfortunately, the front door opened before he lowered the glass. Evelyn Marchionni stood on the front steps with several sheets of paper clenched in her hand. Even from the distance, I could tell the woman glared. I opened the door but hesitated.
Stay in the car.
For a split second, I thought she'd refuse to see me, but rather than going back inside, she joined me in the limo.
This will never see the light of day.
She shook the copy of my article at me.
Do you understand?
I do. Journalistic integrity, paychecks, and my pride be damned. I would have done anything to take it back if that meant I didn't have to see the hurt and disappointment in Gabe's eyes. Her expression softened a smidge.
Is it true? They don't want the life we've made for them?
I can't presume to speak for the others, but Gabe is struggling. I lowered my voice in hopes of keeping the tension in the car to a minimum. We were two women having a conversation about a man we loved. Evelyn glanced out the window and drew a deep breath.
My parents held the deed to our house until they died. Joe's father left the business to him in his will. This is how things have always been done.
Your sons know this and respect you and Mr. Marchionni too much to put up a fuss about it, but
they don't like it.
No, they don't. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. The guys were raised in the States. They have the best of both worlds, Sicilian values and American work ethics. Gabe busted his butt to make his bar successful, handing it over to Leo. He will make the Marchionni Corporation just as successful. She raised her chin. You're right, he will. I chose my next words carefully. He will do what's asked of him. He'll live where you tell him to live, work where you tell him to work, and marry who you tell him to marry, but at what cost? She stared as if daring me to say more. Rather than go at her with both barrels, I went for a softer approach. What was Mr. Marchionni like when he was young? Evelyn cracked a half smile. A lot like Gabe. Handsome, driven, and tender-hearted. Her candor surprised me to the point I pushed the subject that shall not be mentioned. I don't want the family business to harden Gabe the way it did Papa Joe. Her eyes widened before she could smooth her expression. Boys grow up and become men. It's a fact of life. Gabe is a man, a successful man in his own right, as are Enzo, Leo, and the rest. I drew a deep breath. As I wrote in the article, Gabe has one foot in the old world and one in the modern world. It's tearing him apart. She sighed. I see. Your sons should be allowed to run their own lives, own their homes, choose their careers, even if that means they don't want to be a part of the family business. She straightened her spine and folded the papers in half, a sure sign the conversation had come to an end. You are a naive girl who doesn't understand the world. Maybe, but I know you don't want to bury another son. Can you honestly tell me Gabe will be safe? She dipped her chin and made the sign of the cross. It won't come to that. Even if it doesn't, do you want to visit your sons in prison? It's not like it used to be. Everything we do leaves a digital footprint. Law enforcement already suspects they're involved in organized crime. How long until one of them is caught? Tears filled her eyes. I reached for her hand. He'll honor his father's wishes to take over the company, but he will run it the way he sees fit, including breaking ties with organized crime. Evelyn's shoulders slumped, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked her age. I pray we will all live to see the day. I have faith in your son. Chapter 33. Maggie. Dahlia and I sat at Shauna's kitchen table, which had been turned into a makeshift salon. Piles of makeup, hair accessories, and styling tools lay in disarray on every level surface in the small space. Let me get this straight. He hired a waitstaff, took you to a private courtyard, wined and dined you, then you went home alone? Dahlia shook her head. Pretty much. I sighed, trying to be still while Stephen pinned a curl in place. Forget that. I'm pissed Papa Joe killed your article. Whatever happened to free speech? Shauna's mouth moved, but the rest of her remained still as her stylist glued a thick row of false lashes in place. I had mixed feelings about the violation of my constitutional rights. In truth, I'd written the article for an audience of two, Evelyn and Joe Marchionni. I don't care about the article. I need to set things right with Gabe. Dahlia sighed. I still don't understand what happened. What did you argue about? I couldn't exactly tell them the details of the conversation, and I had to give them something or Shauna would keep digging. I went with the next obvious explanation. I told him I had Chantal investigated. This Chantal woman had a husband who killed himself because the Marchionni Corporation took his business out from under him. Stephen made a clucking sound with his tongue as he wound a chunk of my hair around the curling iron. Pretty much, though we don't know for sure why he killed himself. I turned my head a fraction and Stephen yanked my hair. Ouch. Beauty is pain, be still. He jabbed a bobby pin into my scalp. So what, he slept with a married woman? Stephen took a step back, admiring his work. Not unless the relationship lasted longer than he says. Shauna sprayed enough hairspray to mortar a brick wall. I don't care if he slept with a married woman. I mean, he isn't the one who broke a vow, right? I glanced between them. Right. Stephen grinned and moved in front of me to put the finishing touches on my makeup.
Spoken like a woman in love defending her man.
Wrong, Shauna added. You're actually going to marry him? Shauna asked incredulously.
Of course she is,
Dahlia said, opening her eyes wide to free her natural lashes from the glue. If he'll have me. I glanced at the diamond on my finger.
Honey, stop worrying about it. You're going to kiss and have hot makeup sex.
Stephen grinned. Easier said than done. I surveyed my reflection, hardly recognizing myself. The new shade of blonde and a heavy amount of makeup made my eyes look bluer. Stephen had darkened my eyebrows and used a pale pink shimmer on my lips. I held the silver mask in place, surprised that it didn't get in the way of my mile-long lashes. Looking rather proud of himself, he folded his arms.
Time to get dressed, princess. We can't have you late to the ball.
The limo inched up the street leading to the Marchionnis' mansion. Unlike the last time I'd visited, this time I had an invitation. I'd spoken to Evelyn several times since our chat in the limo. While she still insisted the old world ways were best, she conceded on several points, including allowing her sons to handle their finances. I wasn't naive enough to believe she could talk Papa Joe into renouncing his ties to the mafia, but I trusted her to do what was right for family. And that gave me hope. I peeked out the window at the costumed people milling about the portico. It reminded me of a scene straight out of Venice minus the canals, of course. My throat tightened and my vision blurred at the thought of Gabe. I hadn't seen him or Ella in several days, not since the night I'd ruined his proposal. I missed him more with each passing second. Shauna gave my hand a squeeze. If I can do this, so can you. You know how much I hate these society things. Dahlia rolled her eyes. You always say that, but I didn't hear you complaining when I got your ticket or when we were getting dressed. Fine. I like the events, but I could do without the people, except you two. Maggie is as poor as I am, and you can't help it your father is an oil man turned governor. Shauna turned from Dahlia to me. You got this. I nodded.
Cheer up, Mags. A lot of women cry their first time,
Dahlia whispered, and the two traitors burst out laughing. I'm never going to live that down, am I?
Not a chance,
Dahlia snickered. Let's put our masks on and pretend we're movie stars. Shauna winked and tied her mask behind her head. Dahlia stared out the window, likely searching for Leo.
Ready, ladies?
As I'm ever going to be. I twisted the engagement ring. Dahlia climbed from the limo as if she rode in limos every day. Her easy grace made me feel even more awkward. For the umpteenth time that day, I wished Gabe was by my side. He had a way of calming my nerves and making me feel beautiful. Shauna stepped from the limo and joined Dahlia beside the car. I drew a quick breath and set one foot on the driveway. Taking my time, I arranged the layers of silk chiffon before I stood. Here goes nothing. The breeze picked up, sending my hair and soft blue and white fabric swirling around me. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Gabe. He stared, but I couldn't decipher his expression. I took a step forward and stumbled on the uneven cobblestone. Shauna caught my elbow before I embarrassed myself. Did you see him? Yes, but he disappeared again.
He might have been called away. Leo swears he isn't angry with you.
Dahlia moved to my other side. We walked into the large courtyard behind the portico. A band played in the distance, and waiters with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres milled among the new arrivals.
There's Leo. I'll get the scoop.
Dahlia lifted her skirts and hurried off. One down, one to go, Shauna said under her breath. I motioned to the couple, who were whispering like schoolgirls. I don't know why they don't admit they're in love and put each other out of their misery. Pot, kettle, Shauna smirked. That's what I'm here to do. I hooked my arm in Shauna's and walked through the crowd toward the sound of music. The first Marchionni to approach was Enzo. Dressed in a dark tux, white shirt, and deep green tie, he looked like he belonged with Shauna. Even the blues and greens in his mask complemented her peacock feathers. He nodded in my direction, but his eyes remained focused on my bestie. He leaned close and whispered,
Would you care to dance?
"Oh, I see how it is. Not even a hello, Enzo." I lifted my mask. He did a double take.
Maggie? Wow, I didn't recognize you. You look fabulous.
I twirled, showing off the costume. "Thanks. So do you. Have you met Shauna?" Enzo smiled behind his half mask.
I have now.
"Shauna, this is Enzo Marchionni. Be careful. He's almost as smooth as his brother."
Please dance with me, Bella.
He offered his hand. And just like that, Shauna seemed to fall under his spell. "I'd love to." I couldn't help but smile as they walked to the dance floor. In all the years we'd been friends, I'd never seen Shauna blush. Until now. Once the crowd swallowed the couple, I turned and almost toppled over a waiter carrying a single glass of champagne. "Excuse me."
This is for you from the gentleman.
He nodded toward the drink. "Thank you. Which gentleman?" The waiter gazed over the crowd.
My apologies, miss, but I don't see him.
"Thank you." I took the glass and walked away. Sipping champagne, I glanced over the crowd and met Gabe's father's gaze. Crap. The last person I want to speak to. I made my way toward the dessert table to avoid the elder Marchionni. A couple of chocolate treats would ease my nerves.
Maggie?
Papa Joe kissed my hand.
You're a vision tonight.
All of the Marchionni men were handsome, including Papa Joe. He had the same green eyes as the boys, but his hair had turned silver. "Thank you, Mr. Marchionni." I took a large gulp of champagne and made a show of looking around. I had no idea if Evelyn had told him I'd written the article or about our conversation.
Please call me Joe. It's almost time for Chloe to perform. You're seated with the family.
Of course. I knew that she and Gabe had been planning a private recital, but I had no idea what they had in store. I couldn't imagine putting Chloe on stage in front of so many people. My stomach knotted with worry at the thought. Papa Joe led me to a table front and center of the stage. A half a second later, Gabe and Zach walked toward the stairs, carrying guitars. Nadine and Evelyn joined us, both women staring at me open-mouthed. I probably wore the same expression. As far as I knew, they couldn't stand each other, but to see them now, you'd think they were old friends. My mother nodded to me.
Mary Margaret, you look gorgeous. You look absolutely gorgeous.
Evelyn patted my hand. I might have been petty, but I reveled in my mother's stunned, stupid reaction. The makeover had done wonders for my confidence. Not even Nadine could ruin it. My mother leaned close and whispered, "I'm hurt. I had to read about your engagement in the paper." I cringed. She deserved to have heard it from me, but things had gone sideways after the announcement was published. Not to mention, I didn't want her negativity muddying the already dirty water. "I should have called, but I wasn't sure you'd approve." She managed to frown without actually moving her lips. "Why would you think that?" "Men like Gabe marry girls that look like Rebecca." For the first time in as long as I could remember, my mother seemed flustered. She pressed her hand to her chest and bowed her head. "I only meant to spare you pain." Before I could respond, the lights dimmed. Gabe half sat on a stool, his acoustic guitar settled onto one thigh. Zach stood at the microphone, glancing around. The band behind them quieted and a single spotlight centered on the teen. "For those of you who don't know me, my name's Zachary Marchionni. A year ago, my parents died in a car accident. My little sister and I would like to dedicate this performance to them." Zach moved to the stool beside Gabe, and the spotlight widened to include a larger portion of the stage. Gabe and Zach began to play the first few notes. The wall behind the stage lit with family photos of Rebecca, Joe, and the kids. Each image struck me like a throat punch. I couldn't look. Instead, I focused on my guys. The crowd gasped when Chloe took the stage. She wore a soft pink tutu trimmed in deeper shades of pinks and purples. 2 fluffy wings rested on her back. Gabe strummed the rhythm and Zach played melody. It was gorgeous, but I almost fainted when Gabe leaned closer to the microphone and sang Clapton's Tears from heaven. Chloe completed several piqué turns, glided across the stage, and dipped into a plie without missing a step. Her performance was fluid and graceful, even when she spun in a series of slow pirouettes. I'd never been so proud of her. But I would have loved it if she'd stomped across the stage doing the chicken dance. I didn't as much as blink until all three took their bows and made their exits. Evelyn and Nadine both blotted their eyes with tissues. Even Papa Joe looked misty-eyed. I swallowed the lump in my throat and fought to hold back tears of my own. The guests cheered until the trio returned to the stage and took another bow. Then Chloe ran down the stairs and straight into my arms, which was when I lost my battle and choked out a sob. "Did you see me? Did you like it?" Chloe grinned, her cheeks red from dancing. "You did great. I loved it." Zach dragged the toe of his shoe across the ground. His cheeks were red too, but not from physical activity. I drew him into a quick hug. "You're getting really good. I'm so proud of you." He grinned and shrugged. "Gabe's been helping me." Zach surprised everyone when he offered his hand to his sister. "Would you care to dance?" Chloe squealed and pulled him to the dance floor. I watched them for a moment, but I needed to find Gabe and bury myself in his arms. Papa Joe stood.
Would you dance with an old man?
"I'd love to." I finished my champagne in one gulp and set the glass aside. He set his hand on the small of my back and led me to the dance floor. The gesture reminded me of Gabe. He had to see me at the table. He must be avoiding me. Papa Joe took my hand, placed his other on my hip, and led me in a slow waltz across the dance floor. His cancer hadn't stolen his charisma. He had an old-world grace that reminded me of classic movies and gentler times. Although few would call Giuseppe Marchionni Sr. gentle, the contrast between the family man and the business tycoon confused me. Is Gabe the same?
How are my grandchildren?
He smiled behind his simple mask. They're great. Growing up too fast and keeping me on my toes, but I wouldn't change a thing.
I want you to know that I think you're doing a terrific job raising them. You're good for my son, too.
Thank you. A shadow passed over his expression.
I read the article you wrote.
Blood roared in my ears. Mr. Marchionni, Joe, you have to know
It's given me a lot to consider.
He spun me in a circle and drew me closer.
But I trust there will be no more stories about the family.
A little light-headed, I held tighter to keep myself upright. No. As a matter of fact, I finished my novel. I'm expecting an advance from the publisher within a week or two.
That's wonderful news. Another female spy thriller.
How did he know what I wrote? Yes, with the same heroine. Papa Joe chuckled.
You seem surprised I read your book.
I just never pictured you as my demographic.
I'm more than the business, Maggie.
He lowered his voice.
The greatest gift you can give Gabe is to always remind him he's a father, a husband, and a man, not simply a title and a job.
I nodded. Between the sentiment and the champagne, I didn't trust my voice. Something behind me caught his attention, and he stopped dancing.
May I cut in?
Gabe brushed his hand over my bare shoulder. The sound of his voice caused flutters in my belly and my hands to tremble. I turned and smiled through the blur of unshed tears.
Of course. Thank you for the dance, my dear.
Joe leaned forward and kissed my cheek before turning me over to his son. Without a word, Gabe slid his hand into mine and spun me in a slow circle. The sight of him threatened to buckle my knees. His red leather mask had thin black brows painted over its slanted eyes. Between the mask and his pointy goatee, he looked like one heck of a sexy devil.
Stop staring at me like that.
His lips curled into an evil grin that intensified the effect of the mask. Like what?
Like you're thinking about my tongue between your thighs.
Emboldened by his comment, I whispered, "How did you know?"
Because I know you.
He chuckled and dipped me backward. Once upright again, I pressed my cheek to his shoulder. I wish we could rewind and start over.
I don't. Every moment, good and bad, brought us to where we are right now.
He drew me tighter and swayed to the music.
But I've missed you.
I pulled back to look into his eyes. Gabe, He placed his finger on my lips and smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes.
I'm sorry I walked out on you after dinner. I needed to think. I've pushed too hard for this marriage, you're right. It's too fast. I'll back off.
My throat tightened. Are you moving out?
Is that what you want?
He stopped dancing. No, that's the last thing I want. He pulled me close and kissed the top of my head. Gabe, I don't want... I missed a step and swayed against him. My vision blurred, and this time it had nothing to do with my feelings for him. Can we sit? I'm feeling ill. Gabe tucked me against his side and led me from the dance floor. The room began to spin and I slumped against him. Something's wrong. He bent down and lifted me into his arms.
When did you eat last?
Did I eat today? I couldn't remember. In fact, I couldn't hold on to a thought long enough for anything to make sense. My limbs grew heavier by the moment, as if my bones had disintegrated into jello. Gabe set me on one of Evelyn's oversized love seats and untied my mask.
Stay here. I'll be right back.
I started to stand, but he put his hand on my shoulder.
Maggie, I mean it. Don't move. I'll be right back.
Chapter 34. Gabe. Caterers and waitstaff crowded the kitchen, making it difficult for anyone not on the payroll to enter the room. I surveyed the trays of food waiting to be served, looking for something with protein and not too rich. Dinner selections consisted of jambalaya, shrimp creole, greens swimming in bacon, etouffee, and other traditional Cajun dishes. Nothing I could feed Maggie in her condition. Jessie pushed her way toward me.
Is Maggie all right? I saw you carry her inside.
She didn't eat much today, and with the champagne, she's dizzy. I snatched a dinner roll from a tray and opened the drawer.
Gabe!
Jessie shouted. What? I turned with the roll in one hand and the knife in the other.
Did you do something stupid again? She seemed fine until she talked to you.
How can I cause her to be dizzy? I stuffed a piece of cheese into the roll and pushed my way out of the kitchen. Jessie followed.
Stop for a second, will you?
I need to get this to Mags. She grabbed my arm.
Have you seen Chantal Dubois lately?
I jerked free. No, why?
There's a woman who keeps showing up at the bar when Maggie's working.
What woman? Jess, I don't have time for this right now.
I think it's Chantal. Her hair's blonde and she's chubbier.
I haven't heard from her in weeks. She didn't even show up for a court date. I headed toward the parlor. Maggie's mask sat on the love seat where I'd left it, but she'd vanished. My first thought was the powder room. I knocked. When no one answered, I opened the door. Empty. I pulled my cell from my pocket and dialed Maggie. No answer, but her ringtone played nearby. I hit redial and followed the ringing to her purse under the love seat. I tore the mask from my face and called Enzo. Hey, have you seen Maggie?
Yeah, man, she's looking smoking hot tonight. I'm busy. Can this wait?
Enzo, listen. She isn't feeling well. She's not where I left her, but her purse is here.
Hang on.
Mumbling came over the line as if he'd covered the phone with his hand.
I'm with Shauna. She said Maggie was fine earlier today. We'll help search for her.
I strode back toward the kitchen in hopes of finding Jessie. I caught a glimpse of her bright red gown outside, but lost sight of her by the time I made it to the door. Why do women keep disappearing on me tonight? My mother came out of nowhere and set her hand on my arm.
Is everything okay?
Have you seen Maggie?
Not since you carried her inside. What's going on?
I ran my hands over my head. She isn't feeling well. I need to find her, Ma. Something's wrong. She pursed her lips.
Did you pick a fight?
No, I did not pick a fight.
She probably rejoined the party. Relax. She'll turn up when your father announces the engagement.
There's no engagement. I called it off. She needs more time before we force her down the aisle.
Nonsense.
Evelyn handed me an envelope.
She's a little naive, but she loves you. If you don't believe me, read the article she wrote about you.
I shoved it in my jacket pocket and walked away before I said something I'd regret. I spotted my father in the center of a semicircle of young women. Sorry to steal him away, but I need a quick word. Papa Joe flashed the women an award-winning smile and turned to me. What's wrong? I can't find Maggie, and Ma told me you're planning to announce our engagement? Joe laughed and slapped me on the back. She'll turn up when I call her name. I lowered my voice. There is no engagement. I need to find her. She was wearing your ring earlier. What did you do? She was? Nothing. Why does everyone in this family think I did something to Maggie? I sighed, scanning the crowd. She's ill. End of story. Joe opened his mouth, closed it, and shook his head. Before he could say anything else, I walked away. Shauna stopped me on the way back to the house. Have you found her? No. I noted her swollen lips and wrinkled gown. Fucking Enzo. Careful with my brother. It's complicated with him. Chloe ran to me and hugged my leg, her smile fading when she saw my expression. What's wrong? I brushed my hand over her cheek. Sweetheart, have you seen Aunt Maggie? Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Papa Joe's voice rang out over the crowd. Me and everyone else turned our attention toward the stage. It seems my son has lost his fiancée. Mary Margaret Guthrie, would you please return to the parlor to claim him? Joe chuckled and the crowd joined in. Holding my breath, I scanned the crowd for any movement toward the main house. After a few moments, my father made the same announcement, but Maggie still didn't materialize. Shauna tugged at my jacket. Did you two have another argument? No. I left her for 5 minutes to get her something to eat. When I returned, she was gone. I lifted Maggie's silver purse in front of Shauna's face. She left this behind. Maybe she went home, Shauna mumbled. I nodded, though I doubted Maggie would have left without her purse or without telling anyone. With each passing moment, my gut clenched tighter. Coupled with the frustration burning a hole through my chest, I felt as if I would come out of my skin if I didn't find her. I held my phone to my ear and forced myself to loosen my grip before I cracked the case. Hildy, this is Gabe. Is Maggie there? No, she isn't. Is everything all right? Frowning at Shauna, I shook my head. Call me the moment she comes home. An hour later, we'd searched the entire house and called the police. The party guests began to leave when the squad cars arrived. Detective Wayne O'Malley had been at the party when Maggie went missing. He pulled me into an empty guest room and closed the door behind him. Did the two of you have an argument? No. I folded my arms across my chest, rather defensive after answering the same question so many times in one night. Look, I'm trying to help. We were dancing, and she said she felt faint. I brought her inside and went to get her some food. When I came back, she was gone. I sank into a chair. From the moment she went missing, I'd been hit with questions like machine gun fire. And you found her purse near where you left her? I called her cell and heard it ringing. I ran my hand through my hair again. At this rate, I'd be bald by morning. I sent an unmarked car to her house in case she turns up. I checked in with the sitter a while ago. She wasn't there. How could she disappear? I stared at Wayne, trying to decide if I wanted to punch the man in the face or cry on his shoulder. What about security cameras? My folks don't usually bother with them during events like this. Too many people in and out. I stumble over my words. It's not like I could tell a detective my father turned them off to provide the less savory guests privacy. Is there anyone you can think of who would want to harm her? Wayne maintained a professional tone, though his eyes gave away his concern. Jessie said something about my daughter's mother hanging around Maggie at the bar. I balled my hands into fists. I promised her I'd protect her. If anyone hurt her, I'd make them pay. What's her name and address? Do you have a current picture? Wayne pulled out his phone. No photo. She's about 5'8", long dark hair, though the woman Jess saw is blonde. If it's even the same woman. Last I heard from Chantal, she'd left town. Name? Chantal Dubois, 921 Dauphine, Apartment A. She works for one of the cruise lines. I haven't seen her in almost 3 months, since she dropped my daughter off on my doorstep. Wayne winced and typed into his phone. Anything else? She's been trying to extort money from me since she got the paternity results. Child support? No, she doesn't want the baby. She wants money. He glanced at me as if he had something to say, but shook his head and rubbed his jaw. Chantal was married to one of my brother Joe's business associates. The deal went south, and the guy offed himself. Martin Sinclair? Wayne's eyes widened a fraction. That's the one.
Chapter 35. Maggie. Maggie, are you okay? The jackhammer in my head caused the softly spoken words to sound as if broadcasted through a concert-sized speaker. I tried to sit up, but the room began to spin. Oh my goodness, here, let me get you home. My car's right out front. Denise Trudeau forced me upright. Who invited her of all people? I shook my head and the slight motion caused my stomach to lurch. Someone lifted me to my feet and another person pressed against my side. A man? Gabe? No, too short and bald. Justin? Voices whispering, then talking, reassuring that they would take me home. They said I'd had too much to drink, passed out. It felt as if half the world moved as fast as a carnival ride, while the other oozed in slow motion. I had the sensation of movement. This isn't right. Foggy and confused, I tried to sort out what happened. Put me down. Where's Gabe? Something smashed against the back of my head. It took a moment for my brain to register pain before everything went black.
Gabe. They left in a dark-colored sedan. Toyota, I think. The young valet looked between Wayne, me, and the gathering of uniformed police officers. Is this the woman who was passed out? Wayne held Shauna's cell phone to the guy's face, a picture of Maggie in her costume on the screen. Definitely. I remember the costume. I thought she looked like a Valkyrie or something. You let these people put an unconscious woman into a car? My anger and fear narrowed to a single point, the valet. They said she had too much to drink, he murmured. Wayne took a moment to scroll through the pictures on Shauna's phone and showed the valet a photo with Chantal in the background. Is this the woman who took her? The kid shook his head, then hesitated and shrugged. No, she had red hair. Could she have been wearing a wig? Maybe, I don't know. Did you get a look at the man? I stared at the image and my blood ran cold. It had been taken in the dress shop. Short and stocky, he wore a black mask, the cheap kind, like you get at the French market. Don't you guys write down license plates? It took every ounce of my willpower not to slam that kid into the wall. Yes, and the make and model, but we toss the ticket when they pick up the car. Wayne motioned to one of the uniformed cops. Go through these. Look for an older, dark-colored sedan. I'm going to Chantal's. I turned to walk inside, but Wayne grabbed my arm. You need to stay put. We have people there now. If this is a ransom situation, they will likely call your cell. Let's go find out why Shauna has a picture of your baby mama on her phone. Shauna sat on the sofa in the den. Her makeup smeared down her cheeks. Evelyn, Nadine, and Dahlia sat on the opposite couch. The women looked up when they entered the room. I met my mother's gaze and shook my head. Where's my daughter? Nadine stood, placing herself in my personal space. I set my hands on her shoulders. The police are looking for her. What did you do to her? What did you do? Nadine crumpled into a heap on the couch. Wayne squatted in front of Shauna. Why do you have a photo of Chantal Dubois on your phone? What? The color drained from her face. That's Chantal? My frustration threatened to pour out of my mouth, but I forced myself to keep my voice at a reasonable volume. Yes. Now answer the question. We didn't know who she was. She said her name was Lindsay. She's the one Jessie said has been hanging around the bar. I'd seen pictures of Chantal, but she looks so different now. She glanced between the detective and me. I remembered Maggie mentioning a tag-along the night of the proposal. I should have listened. Where did you see pictures of Chantal? Maggie asked me to do some digging right after you moved in. She was worried about you and Ella. Wayne nodded. What did you find? Anything you can tell us might help find Maggie. Cringing, I prayed she wouldn't say anything to add gasoline to the inferno brewing in the room. She works for the cruise line, has an apartment on Dauphine. Widow of Martin Sinclair and filed bankruptcy after he died. Maggie worried that she would try to use Ella to extort money. Shauna wiped her eyes on a tired-looking handkerchief. Does your father know? My mother speared me with a glare. Evelyn was wicked smart, too smart. Though Shauna hadn't come right out and said it, my mom had put the pieces together. She knew I'd knocked up the enemy. I don't know. I'd half expected Santiago to tell them. Cowardly, but I couldn't figure out how to tell them without starting the apocalypse. Evelyn turned her head as if she couldn't stand the sight of me. Nadine mumbled something under her breath. Shauna took her hand.
They'll find her.
Wayne and I locked eyes. He made a slight motion with his head, and I followed him outside. This is looking more like a ransom situation than a jealous former lover, Wayne said. Whatever they want, I'll pay it. I sat on the edge of a concrete planter and hung my head. That generally isn't a wise strategy. If they get the money and run, there's no guarantee you'll get Maggie back, or that they won't try something like this in the future. Wayne's radio chirped, and he walked a few feet away to answer. I stood and went back inside. I needed to talk to my brothers.
Chapter 36. Maggie. My head bounced against something hard several times, and gasoline fumes assaulted my already turbulent stomach. I forced myself to focus on my surroundings. A moving car? Oh my God, I'm in a trunk. A scream bubbled from deep in my gut, but fear seized my lungs, making it difficult to get a breath. The air felt thin, too thin to breathe. I pushed the trunk door with bound hands, but it didn't budge. Calm down and think. I felt along the lock for the safety release. My fingers pressed against a wire, but the latch itself had been removed. Pushing my fear down deep, I focused on the situation. I was in a locked trunk, hands bound in front of me, legs free. I can do this. I managed to pull a bobby pin from my hair. It fell beside my cheek. I removed another one, but it was hard to hold onto it with my hands cuffed in a moving car while shaking in fear. Holding the third pin tight, I bit off the rubber tip and scraped the end of the pin across the body of the cuffs. Once the tip entered the lock, I bent it to a 90-degree angle. Halfway there, I wedged the curved end into the hole and twisted in the opposite direction, forming a dip before the first bend. I put the pin in my mouth and used my tongue to test the shape. The car slowed and I gasped, nearly swallowing the damned pin. My heart raced as unwelcome thoughts filled my mind. If they stopped, if my kidnappers came for me now, I'd be defenseless. Closing my eyes tight in the dark space, I worked the bobby pin into the lock. The car lurched forward and I dropped the pin. Minutes, seconds, or hours ticked by. Time became too dangerous a concept to consider. Are these my last moments alive? The longer they drove, the better my chances of getting out of the cuffs. But the longer they drove, the farther away from home I'd be. Time was not my friend. The lock opened with an audible click. One hand free, the cuffs dangled from my other wrist. No sense in wasting time picking the other side. Plus, if they stopped, I could slip my free hand into the loose cuff to make it look like I was still bound. I felt along the trunk door near the lock, where the safety latch should have been. I found the release wire and wedged my bracelet wrist between the wire and the metal. Turning my wrist side to side, I wrangled the wire loose. The trunk door presented another problem. The kidnappers would see if it flew open. I ran my fingers over the latch in search of a groove or hole to hold onto when I pulled the release cord. I found a hole large enough to push the end of the open handcuff into. Yanking to test the hold, I grabbed the wire with my free hand. Keeping the tension on the handcuff and the trunk door, I yanked down on the cord and flexed my other arm at the same time. The latch released, but thankfully the door only opened an inch. It worked. I pushed on the metal above my head. The trunk opened enough for me to taste freedom. Unfortunately, we were traveling at a good speed, too fast for me to jump.
Gabe. I rounded the corner into my parents' living room and stopped dead in my tracks. Chantal fucking Dubois stood next to the fireplace with Shauna. Where the hell is she? I had the woman a foot off the ground and pinned to the wall before I'd realized I'd moved.
Stop it! She doesn't know anything!
Shauna tugged my arm, but no way in hell would I let Chantal go before I got some answers. Why are you here? I shook her hard enough that her head thudded against the wall.
To talk to you.
I knew better than to trust her tears. I'd seen them before. They meant shit. Talk. Shauna sighed.
Gabe, put her down.
I released her but refused to step back. Fuck her personal space. Chantal straightened her shirt.
I swear, I don't know what happened to Maggie.
This is the second time your name's come up when someone I love is in trouble. She turned her head and nodded. If you didn't have anything to do with this, why have you been following Maggie? I studied her reactions for any hint she was lying. A waste of time, but it gave me something to do that wouldn't land me in jail for assault and battery.
I went a little nuts when I saw the engagement announcement.
No fucking kidding. I balled my hands. You threatened her.
I know, and I'm sorry.
She drew a deep breath.
I was okay leaving Gabriella with you. You're rich with a huge family. I knew she would be loved, but I didn't know anything about Maggie.
What the hell is she talking about? Don't tell me you actually care about Ella.
Chantal hung her head. I can see why you'd think that, but I carried her inside my body for 9 months. I tried to love her when she was born, but all I could see was you in her.
I stepped back to keep my balance. I knew she'd played me the entire time we'd dated, but I had no idea how much she hated me. Did you get pregnant on purpose?
Yes, because I saw a child as a way to get back what your family stole from me.
Her bluntness surprised me.
Tell him why you followed Maggie.
Shauna stepped closer to me.
I wanted to make sure the woman raising my daughter was a good person.
Her voice cracked. Something didn't add up. I ran through everything I knew about her situation and everything she'd said. Why tell me this tonight? She drew a breath and delivered a bomb.
I came to confront your father. I found the original documents from the sale of mine in Martin's bar. I've contacted an attorney and plan to go public with the information. Your family will be ruined.
And you're here to give me one last chance to pay you off? She gave me a sad smile.
That, or to warn you to distance yourself from your father so Maggie and Ella don't get caught in the crosshairs.
I sank onto the love seat. I had no idea what had happened between her late husband and my father, but I'd pay any amount to protect Ella, Maggie, and my mother from scandal. I'll give you the money, but I expect you to sign a statement that the problems with the contract have been rectified.
Agreed.
She reached for me but seemed to think the better of it.
This can wait a week or two. Make sure Maggie's all right first.
Thank you. The front door opened and my heart stopped. Hildy rounded the corner with Ella in her carrier and Ryan by her side.
Any word?
No. I glanced at Chantal, half expecting her to make a break for the baby, but the woman turned to face the wall.
I thought it best if we were all under the same roof.
Hildy took in the scene as if she knew exactly what she'd walked in on.
I'll take the little ones upstairs and put them to bed.
Thank you. I stood but had no idea what to do next. Shauna cleared her throat.
I'll walk Chantal out and catch Detective O'Malley up to speed.
I'll be in the study. The 2 hours Maggie had been missing felt like days. It was a strange feeling, needing to do everything in my power to find her and being powerless to lift a finger. I wandered through the house in search of my father. If I couldn't help Maggie, I could damn sure get some answers.
Why haven't they found her yet?
Zach's voice echoed down the hall. They will. I set my hands on his shoulders. He reared back and punched me in the chest a few times.
I told you if you hurt her, if anything happened to her, you're supposed to protect your women.
I'm sorry. Feeling as helpless as the kid, I wrapped my arms around Zach's shoulders.
She has to be okay.
My phone buzzed. A call from a blocked number. Go get your uncles. Zach nodded and took off down the hall. Marchionni. I have something of yours. The man sounded as if he worked to disguise his voice. Heart pounding, I forced my voice to remain detached. I'm listening. 100,000 in cash, and another 5 million transferred into my account. You'll receive a text with the wiring instructions. I'll contact you with the location of the exchange once I have confirmation of the transaction. You heard her, and I will rain hell. The caller disconnected. I turned as my brothers and father entered the study. $5 million wire transfer and 100,000 in cash tonight.
Take the money out of my trust fund. I know my mom and dad left money for us. Take it and get Maggie back,
Zach said from behind the men. I hadn't realized the kid had returned, but I couldn't do anything about that now. we had a bigger problem. One look at my father's face and I knew he wouldn't give up the money without a fight. "Zach, please, go wait with your grandmother." My father's voice echoed through the room.
"No, Gabe said men take care of their women. I'm staying."
Zach closed the door behind him and folded his arms.
"We have the cash. I say we pay it. Once Maggie's safe, we track them down and take them out."
This from Enzo, who wouldn't know how to censor himself around kids if his life depended on it. My father said, "No. We pay the 100,000 ransom and have the guys in IT send a fake wire transfer for the rest." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "And if something goes wrong and they catch on?" He narrowed his eyes. "I've been at this a long time. No one ever catches on until they show up at the bank. By then, we'll have the girl back. We're paying them." I squared my shoulders and stared the old man down. "So help me God, if you say one more word about it, I'll walk out of this house and this family." Leo, Dante, and Marco stood and moved to my sides, a symbolic closing of ranks. My father stammered. "You four think you can survive on your own? You have no idea what it means to work for a living." With that, a miracle happened. Enzo pushed to his feet and stood alongside us. Leo said, "What's it going to be? Are you willing to lose the rest of your sons over chump change?" "Pay the fucking money." My father stood but swayed and sank back into his chair. The coughing started with a clearing of his throat and ended with him hooked up to his oxygen tank.
Chapter 37. Maggie. The car slowed, stopped, and moved forward again. A few minutes later, it slowed and stopped. I cracked the trunk open and headlights blinded me. We were stuck in traffic. Now or never. I slid the end of the cuff out of the hole and threw the trunk open. Waving my arms and screaming at the top of my lungs, I almost fell out. The sudden movement sent a wave of nausea through me, but I held down the bile by force of will and adrenaline. The driver in the truck behind us opened his door and ran toward me. Pinned in by traffic, my kidnappers hit the gas and the brakes and the gas again, but they had nowhere to go. I tumbled from the trunk with my legs tangled in the long layers of my dress. My hands and knees stung. Shouting, car doors, and heavy footfalls came from all around me. I scrambled to gain purchase on the asphalt. The sounds of metal slamming into metal and shattering glass filled my ears. My head exploded in pain and my legs refused to hold my weight, but I crawled toward the truck. A man knelt and pulled me to his chest. A woman pressed close and murmured words like, "Safe and you're okay."
"It's all right."
The man released me and motioned toward the car.
"We got him."
It took my brain a minute to make sense of the scene. Several people had pinned Justin and Denise Trudeau to the ground. "It's over?"
"Yes, ma'am."
I choked back a sob and crumbled against the stranger.
Gabe. Wayne came through the front door without knocking. "They found her. She's alive. Only minor injuries." My father let his head fall to his chest. Thank God. For the first time in my life, I watched my father cry. He'd always been the rock of the family, the man that had held us together after my brother died. Perhaps the guilt of his decisions wore on him more than we imagined. Zach sat beside his grandfather and draped his arm across the older man's shoulders, a kindness none of the grown men in the room seemed inclined to do. I swallowed my emotions. "Where is she?" "Baton Rouge General. She escaped." Wayne smiled. "Who took her? Who was it?" The detective glanced down at his phone. "Justin and Denise Trudeau. We don't know why they targeted her. Maggie dated him a few times. She didn't know he was married." I looked away. He threatened to sue me after an altercation. I should have paid this son of a bitch. "You're not in the state of mind to hear reason, but this wasn't your fault." "You're right. I don't want to hear it." Jessie and Evelyn came through the door next. Evelyn went straight to Joe, and Jessie surprised everyone by throwing her arms around Wayne. Right there in front of God and everyone, she kissed him on the mouth. Huh. For months, I'd thought Wayne hung around the bar to flirt with Maggie. Seemed I was wrong about a lot of things. "I'll drive. There's something I need to talk to you about." Wayne jangled his keys. Against my better judgment, I agreed and climbed into the detective's car. Keeping his eyes on the road, Wayne cleared his throat. "I got a tip on your brother's accident." As if I don't have enough on my mind. From who? A guy looking down the barrel of a life sentence. He claims his cellmate told him about a paid hit. He seems credible. He knows details about the accident that we never released to the public. I hadn't realized I was tensing up until my teeth hurt. "We're in the process of questioning the suspect." He sighed and drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry to lay all this on you now, but I thought you'd want to know." A paid hit. A paid hit. The words ricocheted in my skull like a low-caliber bullet. Did he mention any names? Pietro Lazio. Wayne studied my reaction, but I gave him nothing. "Keep me posted." I motioned to the speedometer. "You think you could risk a few traffic violations? I have somewhere to be." He nodded and turned his attention to the road. Pietro fucking Lazio. The head of another Sicilian mob family. My father's closest associate, and if my mother had her way, Enzo's future father-in-law. Why in Christ's name would Pietro order a hit on Joe Jr.? An hour later, I burst through the doors of Baton Rouge General and went straight to the information desk. "I'm looking for Mary Margaret Guthrie." The old woman behind the computer nodded, seemingly unfazed by my urgency. Her fingers couldn't have moved slower over the keyboard if she'd dropped dead. I ran my hand over the back of my neck and tried counting backward from 50 to calm my nerves. About the time I reached 22, she smiled.
Are you family?
"I'm her fiancé."
And who's this?
The woman asked in her pleasant volunteer voice. "I'm Detective O'Malley from New Orleans, PD."
She's in room 230, second floor.
Before she'd finished giving directions, I headed for the stairs. We'd received the call that Maggie had been found almost 2 hours ago. Waiting for information after she went missing felt like the longest few hours of my life. Allowing the detective to drive me to Baton Rouge was worse. Wayne was perhaps the only person in the state of Louisiana who drove the speed limit. I stopped outside the door and drew a breath. I needed to put on my game face before I went inside. I didn't know anything about her condition, other than she'd been drugged and bound in the trunk of a car. It'd do Maggie no good if I wept like a baby at first glance. The door opened, and a nurse came out of the room. She stopped and smiled. That's a good sign, right? "I'm looking for Maggie Guthrie."
This is her room. Are you family?
"I'm her fiancé."
Go ahead, she's expecting you.
The nurse smiled again. "Is she going to be all right?"
Yes, Miss Guthrie and the baby are both doing fine. The doctor wants to run more tests. He may keep her until the poison she ingested clears her system. She's been through a lot.
The hall became white hot, and I grasped the door jamb. Nothing the woman said after the word baby registered in my brain. I considered the probability of there being 2 Maggie Guthries in the hospital.
Are you okay?
The nurse set her hand on my shoulder. Wayne stepped beside me. "He's fine. It's been a long night."
And you are?
The nurse looked at Wayne as if she could tell his profession by his demeanor alone. "I'm a friend."
As long as you're not here to question her, you can go in.
She hurried down the hall. "Go ahead. I'll give you 2 some privacy." Wayne grinned. A baby? Maggie's pregnant? I slipped into the room and stopped a few feet from her. I noted the bandages on her hands and the side of her head. She looked small in the center of the bed, with tubes running from her to various bags and machines. She opened her eyes.
Hey.
"How are you feeling?" I sat on the edge of the bed.
Better.
She shifted her weight as if trying to sit. "Here, let me." I pushed the button with the up arrow and raised the head of the bed.
Where are the kids? Are they all right?
She reached for a styrofoam cup. I helped her guide the straw to her lips, her busted and swollen lips. "They're with my folks. They wanted to come with me, but my mother convinced them to wait until you returned to New Orleans." Maggie nodded and looked toward the window. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and what was left of my heart crumbled. She seemed so broken. I needed to know what she'd been through. How she got away, how she felt about carrying my child, but all of that would have to wait. "Maggie?" I brushed my hand across her cheek. She turned her head toward my touch and closed her eyes.
Hmm?
I love you. When I thought we might lose you. She nodded, but the slight movement seemed to cause her pain.
I love you too.
I read your article. My mother gave it to me.
And?
It was humbling to read how you see me in my situation.
Did I get it right?
Her lopsided grin made my chest hurt. You more than got it right. The reality that I'd almost lost her made my voice tremble. We'd have plenty of time to get into the specifics once she'd recovered, but given we were going to have another child, I needed to give her some peace of mind. I'll answer all your questions when you're out of here, but you should know I've done everything in my power to keep my bar and my nose clean. My brothers and I never wanted in, but we didn't have a choice. Now that I'm in charge, I'm going to get us out. I just have to be smart about it. Do you trust me?
I do.
She reached for my hand and hesitated.
What you said before, about backing off the engagement.
Afraid to hurt her, I eased an inch or two closer and whispered, I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes for you to be sure. But I'm not leaving unless you throw me out. Fair warning, I'll buy the house next door if that's what it takes to be near you.
I'm sure.
She lifted her hand and flashed the diamond ring I'd given her.
I put it on the night in the courtyard and haven't taken it off since.
I cleared the emotion from my throat. Then we have a wedding to plan as soon as they spring you from this joint.
Sounds wonderful. I already have a dress.
Her eyes drifted closed and popped back open like Ella when she fought to stay awake. Babe, you're exhausted. Get some sleep. I kissed the part of her forehead not covered with gauze. I'll be right here when you wake up.
I want to go home and sleep in our bed.
I know, but the doctors want to make sure you and the baby are okay. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I cringed. She widened her eyes. Before you say it, remember, I wanted to marry you before I knew about the baby. Maggie grinned, but Winston touched her split lip.
How did you find out?
The nurse told me. I wiggled my brows. We're going to need a bigger house.
And a nanny.
Thank Christ. It's about time you came to your senses. Chapter 38. Gabe. For the first, and hopefully the last time in my life, I sat at the head of the Marchionni Corp conference table. I had to admit, the power oozing from the chair gave me a rush, but it was a trap. My brothers and father had arrived before me. Though I told no one why I'd called them here, a nervous energy hung over the room like cigar smoke. What's with all the formality? Enzo nodded to the clock. I have to be at the restaurant by 11, and I have to pick up Maggie in Baton Rouge. He had the decency to look away. I'd hated to leave her at the hospital, but the outcome of this meeting would set the course for our future. Besides, I hadn't left her alone. She had Shauna and her mother to keep an eye on her until I could return. I pulled a file from my bag and handed the papers to Leo. This is a legal filing Chantal Dubois plans to take to court and release to the media in a few days. I've made copies for each of you. My father's spine stiffened.
Can we get the Cliff's Notes version?
Enzo took his copies and passed the rest on to Marco. In short, the Marchionni Corporation screwed her out of $500,000 on the sale of a bar she owned with her husband, Martin Sinclair. As a result of the fuckery, Sinclair killed himself. She plans to sue us for the $500,000, along with pain and suffering and anything else she can squeeze out of us. I withheld the fact that I'd come to an agreement with Chantal. I needed my father to come clean about what had really happened. Leo turned to our dad. What do you know about this? Joel made the original deal with Sinclair for his half of the bar, but the wife refused to give up her half. He kept his expression smooth, but I had him by the balls and he knew it. Enzo motioned for him to continue. Any reason why? The wife suspected us of running off their customers and reporting them for selling to minors. Leo pinched the bridge of his nose. This is how you acquire businesses? My father raised his chin and glared. You don't get to judge when the money I've made put clothes on your back and paid for your college. Joe was involved? My youngest brother Dante paled. He'd worship Joe like others did rock stars. Your brother was a saint. My father smiled, but Dante looked away. By the time the wife agreed to sell, we were in a rush. The contract had a clerical error. She didn't bother to read it before she signed. My father shrugged. This is why Chantal hates this family. I ground my teeth. Clerical error? It gave us full ownership for half the cost. The room grew still. Is that why Joe tried to quit the business? Dante leaned forward and looked my father in the eye. Yes, one of the reasons. Joe wanted out? This was news to me. I'd always thought of him as a younger version of our dad, although it gave Pietro Lazio a hell of a reason to want my brother dead. My father shrugged. He would have changed his mind. Dante shook his head. Not true. Joe promised me he'd get all of us out of this life. I needed time to think about the implications of Dante's revelation, so I steered the conversation back to the matter at hand. Why didn't you correct the contract? I didn't know the bitch would go off the deep end and cause this much trouble. He looked at each of us as if to judge our worth. I will not run the corporation if this is what you expect of me. Martin Sinclair is dead, and I've already been a participant in another. I clamped my mouth shut. This wasn't the time for me to give confession. Though I technically didn't have Artie Guzman's blood on my hands, I couldn't tell them the truth, not with my father in the room. Dante's mouth hung open. You killed someone? Leo, God bless him, broke the silence. What do you propose we do about Chantal's case against us? I cleared my throat. I've already taken care of it. The company will pay her the money owed to her, with interest. In exchange, she's agreed to sign documents stating the terms of the original contract have been met. My father's eyes rounded. You played us? I learned from the best. Enzo glared and shoved back from the table. Thanks for wasting everyone's time. I ignored him. There was another matter we needed to discuss. You should know, the police have a tip in Joe and Rebecca's death. Some inmate knows details that weren't released to the media. My throat tightened. Each of my brothers had a visible reaction to the news, but my father hadn't flinched. I'd made the right decision in holding back details like the name of the person who allegedly ordered the hit. Dante's voice trembled. He's saying Joe was murdered? Keeping my gaze on my dad, I nodded. Claims a former cellmate said he was paid to take him out. Leo sucked air between his teeth. Dante wiped his cheeks. Enzo and Marco hung their heads. My father? He stared at me as if daring me to keep talking. I kept talking. You knew about this? He smirked. How would I know about this? When did you figure it out? Before or after you accused an innocent woman? Leo whispered. Let it go for now. Out of respect for my brothers, I dropped it, but my father and I would have a long conversation about the Lazio family. I plan to start the process of separating our legitimate business holdings from the Cosa Nostra and all their known associates. Enzo plopped back into his chair. Can we afford that? We may need to tighten our belts. I'm going to dump anything that isn't earning a profit without the mafia's cash flow. Is it safe? Dante whispered. Rather than outright lie to them, I nodded to my father. What kind of blowback should we expect? That will depend on how you go about this. He chuckled, but it sounded hollow. I'd tell you to go slow, find a compromise you can live with, but you're like your older brother. Neither of you seem capable of taking your time. I took a moment to let them digest the information. If any of you disagree with my decision, now's the time to speak. Enzo squirmed in his chair but kept his mouth blessedly shut. When no one spoke, I glanced back at my father. Pops. It seems I'm outvoted. Run the business as you see fit. Joe sat as a coughing fit stole his breath. I waited until he quieted. I hope you mean that.
Chapter 39. Maggie. Hi. I stretched and nuzzled into my own pillows. After a few nights in the hospital, it was more than good to be home. Gabe pulled me close and kissed the tip of my nose.
Good morning, beautiful.
I'll never take sleeping in my own bed for granted again. What I really meant was I'd never take sleeping in my own bed next to him for granted again. The man kicked off enough body heat to chase away the chill, not to mention he smelled good. Really good, like fresh-cut lumber and spices and sex. What time is it?
8:30.
His graveled, just-woke-up voice gave me all sorts of naughty ideas. Between the days after the disastrous dinner in the courtyard and the 2-night stay in the hospital, I was starving for a heaping helping of Gabe. Do we have time to fool around before we meet the wedding planner?
Maggie.
He'd use the same voice he normally reserved for misbehaving kids. Lucky for me, I felt like being naughty. I brushed my fingers down his chest, to his navel, to the V-shaped muscles. He took my bandaged hand and kissed my fingertips.
None of that.
We aren't even married yet and our sex life is dead. I told you so.
It isn't dead, just on hold.
I kissed the spot on his neck that drove him wild. When will it be off hold?
Soon.
He'd used the voice again, but his lips curled into a grin. How soon? This time I caressed my chest. His eyes darkened. Almost have him. I let out a soft purr and toyed with my nipple.
Not soon enough.
Gabe swallowed and pulled the sheet to my chin.
We have an OB appointment next week. I don't think we should have sex until we know everything's okay.
The doctor at the hospital gave the all clear. You heard the heartbeat. Are you seriously going to make me wait another week? He freaking nodded. Pouting, I crawled on top of him. How about a blowjob? His body tensed to the point it felt like I was laying on a concrete slab. A warm, sexy concrete slab.
We could 69 if we're careful.
Victory is mine. I ducked beneath the covers. The doorbell rang. You've got to be kidding me. I'd never understood the big deal about honeymoons until that moment. Between the kids and the soon-to-be mothers-in-law, morning sex never happened. Gabe laughed, threw the covers off me, and headed for the door.
Get dressed.
I tugged on the sweats and t-shirt I'd left on the floor the previous evening and walked into the living room as Gabe welcomed Detective Wayne O'Malley into our home. Wayne turned to me.
How are you feeling?
I'm okay. What's going on? I motioned for him to sit and curled up in the corner of the couch. Though I didn't want to admit it to Gabe, I ached from head to toe. Being drugged and kidnapped could do that to a girl. Gabe set 3 bottles of water on the table and sat beside me. Wayne leaned forward and put his elbows on his knees.
Justin and Denise Trudeau are being charged with abduction with intent to extort money, assault, and felony stalking.
The memory of the 2 of them being shoved into police cars sent a shiver down my spine. Will they get bail?
It's unlikely.
Wayne pressed his lips into a thin line.
I'll need an official statement when you're up for it. I'll bring her in tomorrow.
Gabe released me and pushed to his feet.
We have a lawyer, but I'd appreciate it if you'd keep us up to speed.
Will do. His expression darkened, and he glanced at Gabe as if asking permission. He nodded.
Sweetheart, Wayne has some news about Joe and Rebecca's accident.
My heart hammered against my ribcage. Okay.
We have an informant who claims the accident was a paid hit.
The blood whooshing behind my ears made it difficult to hear the rest of what he had to say, but I caught enough of it to understand Papa Joe was right. My sister was murdered. Leaning in, Gabe put his face in my line of vision.
Breathe, sweetheart.
I blew out a sigh. I'm okay. I mean, I think I've always known. When will you make an arrest? Wayne glanced at Gabe, likely for backup.
These things take time. For now, know that you and the kids are safe, and we will make the guy pay.
The darkness in his expression sent a shiver down my spine. I believe you. The detective stood.
Maggie, are you planning to go back to work? We miss you at the bar. No more bar work for her.
Gabe gave my shoulder a little shake. I started to argue, but bit my tongue. I had plenty of other things to keep me busy. Besides, being on my feet for hours on end while pregnant would suck. The detective rubbed his jaw. Out of curiosity, how did you get out of the cuffs? I practiced on a cheap pair as research for my latest novel. You'd be surprised what you can learn on the internet. Wayne chuckled. You should finish the series. The first books are fantastic. That's the plan. After my ordeal, I'm full of ideas. Can't wait to read them. He pantomimed taking off a hat. Now that the professional part of the visit is over, can I give you a hug? To my surprise, Gabe moved over so I could stand. The detective wrapped me in his enormous arms and whispered, I'm glad you're okay. Me too. Gabe walked with Wayne to the door. I glanced around the room and realized he'd been right when he'd said we'd need a larger house. Part of me hated to give up another piece of Rebecca, but we all deserved a fresh start. Gabe sat beside me.
Are you all right?
Yes and no. I'm glad they're looking into Joe and Rebecca's deaths, but I'm not looking forward to opening old wounds.
Maybe getting justice for them will help everyone heal.
Maybe. I couldn't shake the feeling he knew more than he'd let on. This has to do with the mafia, doesn't it? He closed his eyes and drew a deep breath.
Yes.
Hearing him admit it out loud scared the ever-loving hell out of me. You're getting out, right?
Yes. I told my father and brothers the day I picked you up from the hospital. It may take longer than I like, but we will go legit as soon and as safely as possible.
And you'll tell me what you can about the process? He took my hand and pressed my palm over his heart.
I'll tell you as much as I can. I swear it on our unborn baby's life.
I trust you. I hated to bring up yet another serious topic, but it had been bothering me for weeks. Do you think Chantal got pregnant on purpose?
Did I forget to mention it when I told you about my conversation with her at the gala?
I narrowed my eyes. I'm pretty sure you did.
She admitted it. As a matter of fact, I believe she's responsible for the bun in your oven, too.
My blood turned to ice. What? He rested his head in his hand and ran his fingers over his forehead.
The rubber I had in my wallet came from a box she left at my place. I had Leo check. They all had holes in them.
My nose wrinkled. He had sex with me with another woman's condom? That's just wrong. He ignored my comment.
She was desperate to get the money my father stole from her.
That's awful. I pressed my hand to my belly. Despite my feelings for her, I had Chantal to thank for 2 of the 5 children in my life.
Speaking of which, it seems she was right about one thing. My father did swindle her out of $500,000. I'm setting things right. It won't bring her husband back, but it's the right thing to do.
That he wanted to make things right for Chantal after everything she'd done gave me hope he'd stay true to his promise to break free of the mafia. I curled closer. What are we going to tell Ella about her mother?
Eventually, we'll tell her the truth, but that's not something we need to worry about anytime soon.
Gabe kissed the top of my head.
You sure you're up for wedding planning today?
I don't think your mom will let us wiggle out of it. He flashed me a grin that was one part let's rebel and one part I have an idea.
Let's get married in the same church as my parents in Sicily. A small family-only event.
I love it, as long as Shauna, Dahlia, and Wayne are considered family. Gabe groaned.
I'm never going to get rid of the detective, am I?
Not a chance. You do realize Jessie has a thing for him, right?
Yeah, she made that quite clear. He shuddered. I'll call and tell both mothers we're canceling the wedding planner.
Oh yeah, that's going to go over well. I was glad he'd volunteered for the task. I'd rather go downtown and give my statement about the kidnapping than face Nadine and Evelyn.
You know they're arguing over which neighborhood we should live in.
How about Florida? I hear the Keys are nice. I laughed. After everything we'd gone through, it felt good to think of the future.
They'd follow us. I say we look for something near Loyola. You'll be close to campus next fall.
I have to plan a wedding and give birth before I can think about applying to school. Plus, I may not get in.
You'll get in.
I smiled, loving that his belief in me gave me more confidence in myself. I would get into the Master of Fine Arts program, write best-selling novels, raise 5 kids, and have an awesome marriage. I could do it all, especially with a man who loved and encouraged me every step of the way. A car door slammed, and Evelyn Marchionni walked past our front windows. Crap, we waited too long to cancel. I had a moment of total panic. We weren't exactly dressed for company. Evidently, Gabe didn't give a crap. He opened the door and gave the woman a shit-eating grin.
Good morning.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, this is how you open the door? Evelyn handed Ella to him and made a beeline for me. How are you, dear? I'm okay, a little sore. I forced a smile. She sat and patted my still flat tummy. You take care of yourself and my grandson. I'm staying off my feet and reducing stress. I nodded toward her son. We've decided to get married in Sicily. She gasped and pressed her hands to her chest. In the church I married my Joe? We can have the reception at the family villa. It will be beautiful. I'll go and... Gabe raised a brow. Evelyn glanced between us.
Would either of you mind if I handled the details? Some of the best vendors in Ragusa only speak Italian.
That she'd thought to ask meant the world to me. That would be great. Thank you.
I should get started.
She gave me a quick hug, her son a peck on the cheek, and all but ran for her car. Standing in the door, Gabe waved, but rather than coming back inside, he frowned.
We have more company. Shauna's here. Looks like she's been crying.
Really? I leaped from the couch and regretted it immediately. My head swam and my right knee felt as if someone had driven a hot poker through it. Gabe slid his arms around me before I toppled into the coffee table.
Whoa there.
Sorry. I plopped back down. Red-faced and puffy-eyed Shauna came through the open door. Where's Evelyn going? I thought we were planning a wedding.
We're getting married in Sicily.
Gabe backed his way toward the kitchen. Cool. I'll catch you two later. She sighed and turned for the door. No way. Not until you tell me why you're upset. I motioned for her to sit. Sinking into a chair, she eyed Gabe. Have you talked to Enzo lately? He muttered something under his breath and shook his head. What in the world was wrong with him? Shauna, what's going on? She dipped her chin. I narrowed my eyes at my fiancé. Judging by his reaction, he had at least a vague idea of what had Shauna so upset. It seemed his promise to tell me what he could didn't extend to his brothers' personal lives.
I'm going to check Ella's diaper.
He grabbed the baby and hot-footed it out of the room. Shauna waited until the bedroom door closed. Enzo and I had a moment at the gala before Gabe told us you were missing. Now he's ghosting me. That jerk. I didn't know Enzo as well as the other brothers, but he'd never struck me as the type to hit and run. It's ridiculous to get so upset over an almost one-night stand, but we texted all day and talked on the phone for hours every night since the gala. I thought... She wiped her eyes on the back of her hand. Maybe he's busy with work or something's come up. I saw him with an Italian supermodel type this morning. She was dripping in designer clothes and jewelry. They seemed close. Are you sure she was Italian? Shauna smirked. I overheard them talking. Gabe? I spoke loud enough for him to hear me from the back of the house. He peeked around the corner as if afraid he'd catch a case of estrogen.
Yeah?
Do you have family visiting from Italy? A woman, tall, thin, fancy clothes, and friendly with Enzo?
Sounds like Nicolina Lazio. His jaw tensed. Definitely not family.
Shauna's frown deepened. I stared at him until he squirmed. Who is she? He held his hand up.
Don't force me to break the bro code.
I narrowed my eyes. Spill it.
They've dated on and off.
He glanced back down the hall, likely planning his retreat.
If it's any consolation, he's not interested in Nico.
Thanks for clarifying, but I'm done worrying about it. Shauna sat straighter. Your brother's an ass. I didn't believe her for a second. She hadn't been so worked up over a guy since high school. I'd get the truth out of her alone over a gallon of ice cream.
Tell me something I don't know.
Gabe held Ella over his head, smiling at her like an idiot. I watched in horror as the inevitable happened. Ella giggled and cooed and spit up. A mixture of drool and soured formula fell in a straight line into Gabe's open mouth. The man didn't miss a beat. He walked to the kitchen, rinsed, and spit. My stomach lurched. Gross. He waved me off like it was nothing. Shauna slapped her palm on her forehead. Laughing, she turned to me. He doesn't act like a card-carrying member of the Bourbon Street Bad Boys Club. I rested my hand on my tummy. Some bad boys grow up and become good men.
Absinthe Minded, a mafia romantic comedy. Bourbon Street Bad Boys Club, Book 1. Written by Kathryn M Hearst. Narrated by Stella Hunter and Aaron Shedlock. Produced by Bookworm Audio. Post-production services provided by Eric Sinestvet. Text copyright 2020 by Kathryn M Hearst. Production copyright 2020 by Kathryn M Hearst. All rights reserved. Be sure and check out Highball and Chain, Book 2 in the Bourbon Street Bad Boys Club, coming out soon. Thanks for listening.